Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Had Ultimate Wisdom Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Creati glanced through her binoculars from her position on the upper landing of a fire escape. Down the alley far below her, several oil barrels glowed with fire and dozens of figures milled about. While outwardly she remained calm and collected, inwardly she was torn between flaring excitement and nervous anticipation. It had been 3 years since she graduated UA, and the entire time had been less than satisfactory. Her experience as a member of the famous Pillars class, the first class taught by All Might, the #1 hero. School had been one insane event after another, and they had all been pushed hard and fast by the school. However, when she had graduated and signed her first contract for a hero agency had been through her internship with. Annoyingly, there had been a mistake. Her family attorney had been under a misguided understanding about specific details, partly on behalf of her parents' wishes and worries. A 3-year contract with one of the highest fashion and cosmetics conglomerate had been part of her sign-up. And per the letter of the agreement, she was kept to a low-stress, low-impact lifestyle. Oh, she pushed to fight and save people as often as she could, but the restrictions had crippled her growth. Now, with the contract over, she had all but rushed to a better place of work. That was how she found herself sitting on a fire escape at midnight in the slums of Hosu. She was keeping an eye on a growing gang problem, which was apparently gathering to raid a rival organization. The other 3 heroes were currently setting up an ambush on the way, in a place where the number advantage would be cut down. Creati, check-in. That was her new boss, Manuel. He was getting on in years but was still a highly ranked and highly experienced hero, and gang activity like this was his specialty. Looks like we were right. I've got 34 gang member with a full loadout of weapons. Mostly clubs and knives from here, no guns. Drats. I was hoping we were clear. Keep an eye on them while we finish up here. Don't engage until they are in the trap. She smiled to herself, the spiking adrenaline doing wonders to her mood. The tranquilizer rifle she had with her would allow for her to offer some range support, and a collection of gear she had was already deployed along the path to the ambush site. She glanced back down and started double-checking her count and check when she noticed it. A new figure was approaching the gathering gang. New contact. Looks almost like a civilian, she muttered across the comms. Orders. Civil quick. Description. Black loose hoodie, cargo pants, boots. Slim at the shoulder and waist. Looks like he's got a bag of something across his back. Faintly, Momo could hear the shout start as a pair of gang members laughed and started approaching the figure. One with a gorilla-style mutation quirk was swinging a heavy tire chain. The other, hair made of metal spikes, was hefting a wooden baseball bat with metal strips that gleamed in the firelight. Oh God, it's not a civilian. It's Wisdom. He's a vigilante. Stay put, we're heading to you. She was about to ask what he was talking about when the alley below erupted into chaos. Wisdom paced himself as he walked down the alley towards the crowd of gang members. They were spread out, gathered in smaller circles and groupings of conversation. That makes this easier. Shifting his shoulders, he felt the familiar weight of his gear, and in his head, the stream of information his quirk was giving began to increase. 35 targets, 1,344 square meters of floor space in the alley and courtyard. The temperature is averaging at 23 degrees Celsius. He took in the numbers. The weights, the distances, the space he was in. That was his quirk. Quantify. Accurate numbers for the world around him. Everything else was simply skill, experience, and drive. Yo, you take a wrong turn, kid? Keep the head tilted down, toss a minor bit of bounce to your shoulders. You're listening to music, bouncing to the beat. Nothing else is in your mind. Yo, I'm talking to you. The punk with the spiky metal hair scowled and hefted his bat higher while the larger gorilla morph next to him sighed in annoyance. He's not hearing ya, Kanto. Loosen the chain around the left arm. 1 meter. Perfect. Lunge. 131 centimeters from the ground to a knee. Plant the sole. Twist the waist. Bring other knee to the throat of Kanto. Lash out, chain flying loose. 212 centimeters from wrist to next target's neck. Twist wrist to coil tight. Chain snaps tight, wrapping twice around neck. Gorilla Quirk stumbles, reaching for neck, choking. Twist with it. Feel stumble from perch collapsing, kick with it. Skull meets gorilla knee, blood splashes from spikes. Press. Not hard enough to take out mutation, but dazed. The other 33 are looking this way. Kick off and swing of the chain as the mutation rushes past. Plant, angle, and yank. Momentum is preserved. Mutation slams into dumpster face first, see the body go limp. Shake chain free, one smooth motion. As Wisdom turned back to the rest of the crowd, they drew weapons and one of them, a leader going by the tattoos and gold chains around his neck, stepped forwards. Ah, the mythical vigilante comes out to play. Wisdom, right? You know, I'm getting the feeling that name's wrong. Keep hood low, and try not to smile as the numbers start counting down. Why would that be? Wisdom called out, stepping forwards again, the chain rattling as it was wound back up around his wrist with slow, careful motions. You came to fight at these odds? 33 to either you're stupid or cocky. 'Cause no way you're walking out of here alive. Really? I thought the odds were in my favor. 15 seconds. I mean, it's not like most of you are better than an average thug, and I only count, 5 quirks with any real combat potential. Frostbite, skin contact thermocore. Can't stop bringing things to freezing temperatures. Counter, water over joints to self-freeze. Overshot, kinetic accelerator. Like to throw things. Counter, get in close and abuse physics. Shiv, blade arms, watch for the edges. Counter, arc. Arcer, transforms into electricity for 2 seconds. Counter, conductive surface can draw his lighting form. Use chain. And of course, the leader, Tempest, wind manipulator. Likes to blast high-speed sand and grit. Counter, fuel air explosion. We'll just have to see. The leader smirked. Bring me his effing head. 2.1. Click. Cardboard boxes scattered along the sides of the alley exploded, smoke and heavy white. Dust being blown into the air and making the various gang members jump and flinch. Lunge, frostbite first. Chain lashes out at a nearby thug. Wrap arm as you step past them and twist and pull. Feel the crack of dislocation. Twist to release. Duck as baseball bat gets thrown past. Reach up and snag the handle. Bat meets knees. Bat meets jaws. Bat meets shoulders. Leave 3 wounded, 1 unconscious. Roll, the smoke parting as a gleaming edged arm comes swinging at head level. Twist and bat to instep. Listen for the crack of thunder. The chain around Shiv's neck and leap. Choking of Shiv drowned out by the crack of thunder as Arcer passes, catches chain, and gets grounded through Shiv. Ignore the smell of bacon. Kick out to intercept thug with a knife, bat to shoulder. Screams. Drop now splintered bat and kick knife wielder back into Arcer as he transforms again. Ignore screams. Unwind chain from now unconscious Shiv, listen. What the F dash, you dumbass, get it together. Watch dash. Kick burning barrel down to spread ignition source. I'll clear the FND smoke. Pull hood down and close, and bandana high and tight, run, leap and duck into the empty dumpster. Pull lid down to keep from flash-fried vigilante, make sure to keep limbs relaxed and jaw unclenched to avoid breaking anything in the shockwave. Tempest throws his arm forwards, drawing air from above the alley down and through, picking up the smoke and dust from the air and pushing it back down the alley to the streets. In front of him, the pressure hit the overturned burning wood and coal in the oil can, pulling it up into the cloud of wood dust and flour he had packed in his distraction earlier. Fuel, air, and ignition. Oh my God, Momo cursed, trying to blink the flare of the explosion from her eyes and feeling from the skin of her face that she was unable to cover in time sting like she had a sunburn. Which, considering how bright that explosion was, and how hot it was, is no surprise. Creati, what the hell was that? We just saw a flash of light. Manuel's voice was panicked and Momo pushed herself back up and looked down at the alley. I think that the vigilante just made the gang blow themselves up. She had dropped her binoculars, and until the smoke cleared away she doubted she could see into the street half of the alley anyway. As for the rest of the alley and courtyard, it was now missing any intact pane of glass from being hit with the sudden pressure wave. There were still a dozen or so gang members stumbling to try and recover at the far end of the courtyard, including the apparent leader and the guy who had been throwing boxes at high speeds into the earlier smokescreen. As the smoke begins to clear, there's a clang, and a slightly more ragged and smoke-covered vigilante comes walking out of the smoke at a brisk pace. He shouts something that Momo still can't quite make out over the distance and the slight ringing in her ears before he breaks out in a sprint. The leader stumbles around and shouts at his remaining thugs, the dozen of them charging to meet the hooded figure. The chain flashes out only to get caught as a guy in a white jacket grabs the links, but at that point, the fight changes once again. The vigilante kicks off, and his arm appends a canister of water over the gang member between him and the white jacket before they get pulled together by the chain, shouts of shock and the faint sound of something shattering making both of them tumble back bound to each other. But before anyone else can capitalize, Wisdom has a new weapon. A long thin rod of metal slides out of nowhere between his fingers, the 4-foot staff slamming end first into the leader's stomach even as the vigilante dips under a wide haymaker and skips around a tackle, redirecting the attacks together. Now the remaining 6 grunts and the leader have the vigilante surrounded, the staff spinning and swaying to keep them spaced away. And then they begin. The 6 charged and only to be met by elegance. Perfectly timed and balanced movements that throw fists and bats and knives wide, only for the shimmering blur of the staff to bounce from target to target, taking out knees and hands and wrapping across arms with jarring force. Out of reflex, Momo tries to identify what style is being used, but nothing matched her mental profile. The motion is unlike anything she's ever seen, seemingly robot in execution, but done smoothly. Each strike takes the shortest distance, the fastest and most efficient arc. There's no style or flair, not a set stance that things lead from. A simple flicker of light and intent. The staff moves where it needs to go to cause the most damage and be the biggest hindrance. And that's not how martial arts and classical styles work. If anything, it's almost more along the lines of Aizawa Sensei's methodology. Pure unending efficiency and logic. Momo's attention snaps back as another burst of wind blows through the courtyard, 2 of the thugs and Wisdom being thrown clear as the panting and bruised gang staggers and regroups. The blast sent Wisdom twisting up and across the courtyard, but a shift of the vigilante allows him to land on his feet, staff resting across his shoulders in a casual stance. We're almost there, Creati. Move to intercept the north side of the courtyard. Don't let them escape. Manuel's voice kicks her into action, and she leaps from the fire escape to a nearby roof, long legs eating up distance as she sprints along the eaves of the buildings. She glanced down at the flashes of that staff which swept legs and broke bones. The closer she got, the shouts of pain and exertions grew louder and clearer and occasional backlash from air flows stronger. She finally came to a stop, reaching back and pulling out the tranq rifle from where it hung at her back. With her viewpoint, she could cover all 3 north side alleys. As she leaned in and brought the scope up, there was a final, echoing crack of steel across bone. Below, the vigilante stood, half of his staff in his hands, the rest shattered and spread among the pile of unconscious enemies. Bringing up the rifle, she took sight and took a long, slow breath, fingers searching for the trigger even as the black hood tilted her direction, a pair of bright gold lenses meeting her gaze through the scope. His hand, the one with the remains of the staff not held in it, came out from under his jacket, and a familiar cylinder appeared. She swore and shut her eye even as the flare of the flash grenade went off. Cursing, she blinked and looked through the scope. Once more, before glancing around. Sheet. Creati, come in, what's going on? The vigilante is gone. He used a flashbang. And with the number of open windows nearby, there's no telling where he's gone. The gang has all been neutralized. Most of them should be fine, just out of it. She sighed as she finished her report, looking over the site below her. Most of the ground cover had been cleared away by the wind quirk and explosion, leaving a pile of debris in the corners of the courtyard. But laying across the expanse of concrete and dirt, the gang members were groaning and shifting in pain. She made her way down to the street, drawing zip ties and simple cuff from her skin to begin binding each villain and gang member. Suddenly, a new voice speaks up over the comms, distorted and monotone, as if run through a text-to-speech generator. You know, Creati Dash. You could have helped a bit. Wisdom speaks through the radio in his hand, resting against a billboard several blocks from where the courtyard fight was. Behind him, hidden under the bright lights of the screen and covered by its support structure, a laptop is open. The screen split between a voice scrambler and a piece of highly illegal software that is designed to hack into her communications. What? How did Y dash? That would be Creati. Hello again, Wisdom, and that would be her new boss. Evening manual. Pleasant night for a jog? He only had to run 12 blocks from his ambush site. Which, to be fair, the choke point on the Hosu underpass would have been a good place for it. If not for the fact the gang had planned to split into 3 teams and hit 3 targets. Something the heroes never got the memo of. I've had better. The hero's response was dry and Wisdom leaned back a bit, getting comfortable in the superstructure of the billboard. Sir, are you sure dash? Relax, Creati. This isn't the first time that our local vigilante has hopped comms when he shouldn't. There's nothing we can do on our end to stop him. Which is mostly true. Well, you could, but it would be expensive and far too much hassle. As it is, just wanted to talk to the new local hero. Creati was finally out of that contract, and the hero geek in him was oh so curious about how skilled and driven she was. You can talk to face me by turning yourself in. The voice was angry and the words sharp, something about it made the vigilante smile, pulling off his golden goggles and yanking down the bandana that covered his face. Oh, feisty. I gotta say, Creati, if this is how you act on the streets, I'm surprised the Avalor Cosmetics contract was able to hold you back. Work on your parkour. Next time I want a chase from you before making my exit. Next time you better be ready to get handcuffed. Wow, Kankawai. Wisdom chuckled at the sudden choking and coughing of a surprised hero even as he tapped at the computer, preparing to close his channel before they could ping his location. Anyway, I gotta bail. Good luck with the paperwork. Grinning, Izuka Midoriya closed his radio app and began to pack up. He had work to get to, and it wouldn't do for the new neighbor to not see him leave as she gets in. Momo Yayarozu, my new neighbor, should be moving in later today. What a wonderful world we live in. As he walked away, the numbers in his skull began to click and shift. I hope you are interesting, Miss Creati. The world needs true heroes. Izuku slid down the fire escape of his apartment building, coming to a stop outside his window. Deft manipulation of the glass sent the window sliding up, and he quietly flowed into his apartment. A black duffel bag filled with his gear dropped onto a counter next to his kitchen. Reaching up, he stripped his hoodie and black long-sleeve shirt from his frame, tossing them across the room to land in his hamper even as he stretched. His black face mask and gold goggles were stashed in his nightstand. With his outfit removed, his pale taunt skin was clear in the moonlight, pale scars glinting silver in the darkness. A gunshot wound through his side, a trio of claw marks across his biceps, and a scattering of faint purple and yellow splotches, remnants of his last few nights of prep and combat leading up to the finale that was the gang fight. His green eyes glinted and he focused. Numbers began to flow off his form, visible only to his eyes, as he took in rates of healing and time passed until bruises would fade. Grunting, he sighed and decided that yes, he would be wearing long sleeves the next few days until that bruise across his left arm was gone. And that he should wrap his hands tomorrow. It's not like he was unknown to the local boxing club. He could explain some bruised knuckles. He kicked off his boots and turned, body going limp as he landed on the disheveled sheets of his bedspread, hand running through his hair to break up the slight clumps where sweat stuck locks of hair together. Sighing, he glanced at the clock. 1:11 a.m. Earlier than his usual crash time. 2 hours before he needed to get up for work. Reaching out, he pulled a loose fleece blanket over his frame. His quirk shifted as he focused on the time he was going to awaken, before with a deep, slow breath, he passed from the land of the waking. Momo sighed as she stripped off the last of her outfit, red sleeveless shirt and black shorts, and silver-accented tactical gear being set aside as she stepped into the small showers of the agency changing room. She couldn't get a full shower or do her hair the way she liked until she got home. Hell, aside from tossing her travel bag on the bed, she had barely seen her apartment since she bought it. The fact she got called in 2 days ago to help prep for the gang capture. Upside, she now had a very good understanding of how Manuel's agency worked, from his 3 sidekicks to his 2 full-time partners and the 2 interns who had been in and out all day. Sadly, her unfamiliarity with the paperwork meant she had only just finished her report, almost 3 a.m.? So she had decided on a quick shower and then heading home and sleeping. Manuel had given her the rest of the week off until Monday. So 5 days off after the sudden rush of her start, and had suggested lots of sleep and getting her apartment in order. She also planned to check out her neighborhood as well. She had managed to find a nice low-rent apartment near one of the nicer neighborhoods in Hosu. Lots of retired or settled residents, and a lot of fairly nice and small-time shops. Scrubbing her body down, she tried to relax, but her mind kept trailing back to the skill shown by the vigilante. After getting back to base, she had found his file, or what little there was. Wisdom, low priority, high-risk vigilante. Appearance, black and gray outfits. Usually long sleeves or jackets, and cargo pants. Known mainly by goggles, gold lenses and a black face mask. Plays the civilian really well. Quirk, reflex augment. Exhibits high levels of physical skill and capability, several martial arts identified in his personal style, and the inclination to use a large variety of weapons and tools. Research has shown that his reaction and reflexes can officially be classed as augmented and are beyond human norms. Senses are expected to be similarly enhanced due to high rate of observer detection. Charges: 13 counts of assault and battery, 4 counts of trespassing, 5 counts of interfering in hero activities, 41 cases of police interference. Suspected of 153 different arrests, most of whom are left on corners after police calls. Calls have been traced through a digital service and multiple VPN servers. No confirmed hack on source. No confirmed kills or theft. Current status: engage only with support. Additional notes: Wisdom, where do I start? Showed up in January, started low-key. Muggers, a few RPSTS. Beat them up, left them on the corners zip-tied to what he could find. Eventually got a confirmed description out of a thug who was lifting cars for a gang. Eventually, Manuel got involved. That was a hassle and a half. Apparently Manuel is no match for the guy, got taken out by a ball bearing of all things. Since then the guy's been taunting the local heroes when he's not helping them out. Ingenium might have better luck, but he's more a daytime and response type of guy. Wisdom prefers low-key conflicts and isn't afraid to get out and vanish at a moment's notice. Wisdom is the guy's own chosen name apparently. Keeps leaving note cards on his takedowns occasionally, calls M-words to the wise. I think it's funny. Y.H. It had been enlightening, and the rest of his file had been incident reports and summaries of his other exploited. Sighing, she rinsed the soap off and shook her head. She could deal with the vigilante ideas later. Despite how interesting his skill set was. I need to head home and sleep for 12 hours, she muttered, watching the last of the soap drain away as she toweled off, before heading to her locker. A pair of sweats, a loose sweater, and some comfortable sneakers, and she was off. 3:15 a.m. Quantify stirred as numbers fell into place with a click, the power taking in the time and sending impulses to its user, data and numbers processed and converted to usable information. And Izuku woke up feeling refreshed. 2 hours is nice. Need to try and sleep earlier like that occasionally, he mused. In the pitch black of the night, with the city sleeping, he rolled to his feet with cat-like grace. The faint scent of ozone and the lack of moonlight only confirmed that a light storm had moved in during his nap. He didn't bother reaching for the lights. Instead, he let Quantify overlap his senses. The distance and space of everything around him echoed out. His sense of distance and depth filled with the numbers he knew. With a slow, lethargic grace, he stepped around the flat. Stepping around a pulled-out chair and heading to his closet. A few minutes of rummaging and he found the clothes he needed. A bright pink pastel long sleeve, a white button-up t-shirt, a denim apron, and black work slacks. Aside from the pink, which was an ever-changing color choice, it was his preferred baking outfit. Tossing the hanger and its attached clothes across the room, they landed hook first with a click on the doorknob to the shower even as he rummaged in the drawers of his closet for a small roll of fighting tape. Finally, he pulled the roll of black tape free and kicked the closet door as he stepped away, the smooth, almost gentle click of it closing lost as Izuku stepped to the shower, closing his eyes as he clicked on the recessed golden LED lights. Letting his eyes adjust beneath their eyelids even as the tape was set on the counter and his pants fell to the ground. As the morning ticked on, Izuku readied for his ever-busy day. He was so glad he had picked up a polyphasic sleep schedule. Otherwise, he would never get all the things he wanted done. Momo darted into the foyer of her apartment building with a soft hiss of annoyance. Rain had begun to drop just 10 minutes ago, as she was turning onto the street to get here. Instead of taking a cab to home, she had walked, and with her being less than 3 blocks away, it would have taken longer to call the cab after the rain started than to just book it to the building. As she shook off the rainwater clinging to her hair, she headed for the elevator. Tapping the 5th floor button, the doors closed behind her and she closed her eyes. Listening to the hum of the machinery, she waited until with a ding the door opened. Pushing herself off the railing and already imagining the comfortable bed she was heading for. She had barely exited the elevator before the last door on the left, the one across from hers, opened and a tall, lanky, green-haired man stepped out. His hands had a tall travel mug in bright yellow with "No Sleep" on the front, and under a bright green rain jacket, an apron was tied around his waist over a white shirt. He turned back and fiddled with the lock as she paced down the hall, and to her door. As she reached in her pocket for her keys, he glanced up. Bright green eyes under silver-framed glasses glanced up and met deep green eyes. A soft smile and a wave came her way, and she tiredly returned it before the green-haired man finished with his door and slid a ring of keys away. As he walked off, he waved back. "Sleep well," he called softly even as he left her. Smiling softly at the gesture, Momo opened the door and sighed as she stepped into her far too barren apartment. Less than 10 minutes later, still damp from the rain, she was out like a light. Izuku strode out his apartments with a soft smile, but it faded as he flipped his hood up and turned down the street. Creati had looked absolutely exhausted, which fit with how she had apparently stopped by her apartment once. Sadly, the entire thing with the South Hosu Raiders, as the gang he had spent the better part of the night beating the sheet out of was called, had been going down. Now he wondered exactly how much of her anger had been stress, and how much had been her normal state. Note to self, revise assessments when she isn't exhausted. Then compare, he mumbled. He let his mind wander as his body drifted to its destination. By 4 a.m., he was unlocking the back door and walking into a small bakery, the Green Leaf. Flicking on the lights as he shed his coat, he breathed in deeply, taking in the smell of thick heady doughs and flours, his prep work from the day before showing on a series of racks where dough was rising and yeast growing. He tossed his coat on the hooks behind by the door him with a loose gesture even as he headed for the sink. A kick sent a rack across the room, where it clanged off the bread dough rack and sent that one spinning around to meet Izuku as he finished drying his hands. He tossed flour over his workspace and got to the fun part. Each bowl was upturned onto the flour, and kneaded a few times before getting separate into the amounts he needed for each bread and pastry he had planned. Bread loaves were set in pans and shaped on the right trays, even as croissants were twisted and dropped, baguettes rolled and set to rise, and rolls were laid out with mathematical precision and intuitive designs. As 5 a.m. passed him by, he finished his last prepped bowl of dough and moved on to baking. Sliding racks and sheets of dough that had risen while he worked into his oven, quantify marking times and readiness with ease. In the meantime, he pulled out a bowl of pie filling, peach today, and began to fill several prep tins with the mixture, stepping away to shuffle and change out pans with an ease of repeated movements as he worked. Soon his shop smelled delicious, and with the pies in the oven he moved around the dividing wall separating the kitchen from the counter, coffee machine, and display case. Turning the coffee on, he set it to drip him a cup of Blue Mountain even as he turned on the case and began to prep his wares, only pausing to take his new cup from the machine and drop some sugar in to cut the bitterness. That done, he wrapped his knuckles and palms to hide his bruises and began to pull his bread and rolls out, displaying them with a casual but content air. By the time the clock read 6, he was ensconced behind the counter, a cup of coffee in one hand and the radio playing soft brass band music, and the sign read "Open," the soft sound of rain dripping past his window a wonderful counterpoint to the air of warmth that filled his shop. Vigilante by night, baker by morning, who would ever believe we were one and the same? Not even counting the bookstore or my degrees. Smirking into his coffee, Izuku let himself be consumed by the relaxing mood. 9:23. Momo groaned as she rolled out of bed, eyes half closed and her duvet following her as she stumbled out of her comfortable cocoon. Blinking, she sighed and tossed her blanket back on the bed, before grimacing at the sticky feeling of dried clothes that wrapped her shoulders. Stripping, she tossed her clothes in the corner, standing in a comfortable black sports bra and boxers. A step towards her closet and she was sighing at the fact that most of her stuff was still boxed up and wasn't yet at her apartment. Pushing the thought away for later, she dug in her suitcase, sorting through the small bundle of clothes she had ready. Eventually, she settled on a thick cream-colored turtleneck and a long denim skirt. Dragging them and a change of underwear, a glance at the dreary day outside having her grab some thick woolen leggings, she stripped and stepped into the shower. As the hot water warmed her up and she blinked the last sleep from her eyes, she started scrubbing down, mind wandering over what she had planned. She had to contact her storage facility and have them ship over all her stuff from her last apartment and get all of that squared away. She needed to check her bank, make sure her rent and utilities would get paid on time and accurately. She also needed to finish the last of the paperwork for manual, and that meant she needed her Wi-Fi connected at the new place, and that she needed to dig her laptop out of her work bag and get it synced with the local Hero mainframe. Finished scrubbing down, she began to work her hair as well, slowly soaking and shampooing it, before adding her conditioner and working it down the black curtain. She was halfway through her final rinse before a groan broke from her lips. "Oh damn it! My hair dryer isn't here." Sighing at the inconvenience, she finished her hair and wrapped it up in a towel, wrapping a second one around her shoulders to stay warm as she stepped out of the bathroom to grab her phone. 3 minutes, and a search for hairdryer schematics later, and she had a working hairdryer in hand, and a tingle of her stomach letting her know she was going to be hungry in a few hours. Getting her hair dry was a lot of work, and, to avoid having to fully wash it the next day, she began braiding it, gathering the thick black locks and slowly binding them back into a large braid that reached down her spine when she let it go, using her quirk to make simple elastic bands as she went. Finally dry and ready, she got dressed quickly. A touch of makeup to hide the faint marks of her late night, and a set of silver studs finished her look, and she smiled. Feeling relaxed and dressed casually, she started making calls. 10. Izuku grinned as he passed back the change for the order, showing off as he offered the change before counting the cash he was handed. Part of that was his way of showing off his quirk and his schooling. The other part was efficiency. His quirk could do the calculations faster than his fingers could input the numbers for a calculator. So he usually just popped the tray open and grabbed the money himself, before typing it in so he had a record. While most places had a digital cash register, usually with an automated calculator and system, his was a mad mix of old-school mechanics and bare minimum digital setup. A card reader and a tablet under the counter let him accept debit and credit cards, but for cash he had picked up an almost 300-year-old cash register. It had been a fun side project when he was first thinking about the bakery, and now the burnished bronze and wood of it sat proudly in the corner of the counter. He often showed off by pulling and cranking it for his transactions, doing the math in his head while the machine chimed and dinged with aplomb. A standard keyboard had been enslaved into it so he could record transactions, but that was more for taxes than anything practical. Beyond that, he joked with some customers, the thing's so heavy it can't get stolen. Sliding the cash into the beast of a machine, he grinned and shoved the box of muffins across the counter. "I hope you have a nice day, Tetsuo. You still planning to join the Friday game?" Izuku leaned against the counter, meeting the other young man's black beady eyes from under his deep orange hair. All 6 of the eyes gleamed in the half-light. "Ah, if the rain clears up enough then I'll be there." Grinning at Izuku, chitin-covered hands grabbed the box, Before long spindly black legs skittered out the door, the ant mutation teen heading back to his job a few blocks away with the snacks. Leaning back, Izuku stretched. The day had been slow so far, with his regulars darting in and out, but not many others. Eyeing the clock, he reached up and ran his hand through verdant locks and pulled it back, letting his square glasses catch the light as he yawned. Another hour and he'll close up and swing back home. Get his next hour and a half of sleep, before heading out to help Granny Show with the weekly stocking at the bookstore. Reaching out, he eyed the coffee machine, quantify gauging heat, time, and how long it would stay what he considered comfortably hot, and Izuku found it lacking. His fingers dipped in his cup of pens and snapped out, a steel ball bearing flying fast across the room, the ring of metal on metal and the click of a switch sounding as the coffee began reheating its contents, the metal ball bearing bouncing up high off the switch as it arched back Izuku's way. One bounce, off the chair and up at an angle. A second, off the counter. A third off the wall behind him as Izuku ducked, hands in his pocket. He yawned, closing his eyes as the steel ball rang home in the cup of pens he had taken if from earlier. Pulling out his phone, Izuku popped open his browser and began passing the time flipping through the HOSA Help Wanted boards and Hero-Core.net theory forums. Let's see. Lost cat, lost parrot? Missing phone, broken laptop. Stolen bike. Gang violence in Southwest Hosu, wisdom cited. Fingers danced across the screen, tabbing through pages until he finally ended up in the Hosu District Watch page, ran by the cops to keep an ear out for civilian concerns. Most of the page was basic. Damaged street lights or power lines, missing trash cans and graffiti, and of course people commenting on dealers and where they saw crimes. For a vigilante who was willing to keep subtle about it, there was a wealth of information at his fingertips. Sadly, most of his recent research had all led into the gang takedown last night, so he closed out and switched to the Hero forums for any recent sightings that caught his eye. Number 12 Hero-Core takes down 12 villains in Kamino Ward. Lemillion saves runaway train from villain attack in Kyushu. Reports of another hero losing their quirk to rare stash of anti-quirk formula bullets in Kamino. 143 reported saved from mass industrial fire by Zero Temp. Rumors of new hero killer cult rising in Japan. Look for red scarves and bandanas and be safe. Continued allegations arise concerning number 1 hero endeavor following Friday's court date. On and on it went. People being saved, villains rising up, and heroes cracking under the system. In the back of his mind, the calculation that he had heard for years rolled once more, his quirk reaching out and crunching numbers and probability to come to an answer. For all that the details changed, so far the answer he knew was there didn't change. Sighing, Izuku closed down his phone to begin getting cleaned for close, heading back to start mixing dough and fillings for tomorrow's batch. 11:02. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Of course. Tomorrow. Yes, thank you. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, Momo finally finished her last call to finalize the deliveries to her new apartment, as well as getting her accounts all put straight and her payments on time. Stretching, she looked at the clock as it slowly ticked towards noon. I need to get out of here for a bit, I'm going crazy, she sighed and pulled on her flats from where she had left them the night before. Digging through her bag, she found an umbrella as well. Let's see. As she stepped out of the apartment, she turned and began to walk along the sidewalk, umbrella keeping the constant drizzle from soaking her as she walked towards where the small market street she was told about was. In the dark of the rain and clouds, the streets were ethereal. Mist wreathed up from the ground around her steps, whipped up and around by opening doors from warm houses and passing cars. Neon open signs and bright glowing marquees proclaiming names were littering the streets, the reflections of light scattered and fragmented across dozens of puddles and rain-slick surfaces. It was only a 5-minute walk to the market she had been pointed to, a wide-open square of streets that nestled around a block with a library and a small park. She could see, just from the corner closest to her apartment, at least 4 boutiques with cute and stylish mannequins in the windows. A Starbucks and a more indie coffee shop sat on opposite sides of the square. There was a small market next to her, and as she walked by she made out strands of vegetables and fruits, next to a series of shelves and coolers. Just next to it was a butcher's shop, signs declaring going prices and availabilities hung in the window, concealing most of the counter she could see from view. As she walked, eyes roaming from place to place, she took in shop hours and locations. This was likely to be where she was going to shop more often than not. Eventually, she had circled more than half the square, only stopping at the Indie Coffee momentarily to grab a warm cup of mocha, heavy on the cream. She came to a stop under an awning as she sipped at the coffee, letting the hot drink warm her, bringing color back to her cheeks against the cool air. Satisfied, she looked around at where she was sheltered. The awning was to a closed shop, the sign proclaiming something about curios and collectibles. Just next to it, however, a pale green neon glow lit up the street. Leaning out and looking up, a deep green neon sign, the kanji and English translations cut into a black panel over the light, proclaimed the Green Leaf Bakery. Looking down, she could see the lower half of the display windows were filled with pastel green and brown shelves, covered in plants and a small herb garden. Above shoots of bamboo and crawling vines, the windows looked in on a bakery. Of bright pale wood and pastel green accented walls. The counter itself was heavy brown, almost black, wood, with a matching bakery display to its side filled with rows of bright loaves of bread and desserts. Looking down, she decided, with advice from a rumbling stomach, that she would like to have a breakfast as well as coffee. Glancing to make sure the store was still open, it was for another 20 minutes, until noon, she pushed her way in, the faint ringing of a bell drawing her gaze up before she looked down. I'll be right there, came a call from around the wall hiding the kitchen from view. While the counter was unmanned, that only lasted a few seconds, as a slender young man with green hair and silver-framed glasses, arms smeared with streaks of white and a black apron half covered in the same came around the corner. Momo felt as if she had seen him before, but was unable to put a place to his face. As the man ducked slightly, his hands came up with a wet towel in them, scrubbing the white, what she now recognized as a thick flour, off his hands. "Hello. Welcome to the Green Leaf. I'll be your baker and proprietor today. Midoriya Izuku at your service." The line rolled out in a smooth tenor. Momo gave a slight smile. "Hello. I'm sorry, but you look familiar, but I just can't place your face." "Oh, we met last night." The green-haired teen leaned over the counter, grinning slightly. "I'm not surprised you forgot." "Last night?" A spark of thought, laced with panic, shot through her head. "Met last night?" She did a double-take, eyeing his long, slender form and loose smile, genuine, not a customer service mask. She noted the green hair and exercise-taped wrapped knuckles. But the only person she really met last night was golden lenses and a black mask, fluid motions and flickering chains and staves as he darted through a fight. "Oh, yeah, you look tired. I'm your neighbor. Apartment I passed you when you got in last night." Her train of thought shattered under the kind smile and the sudden memory. Silver glasses and a soft, "Sleep well," as he passed her. Red rushed to her cheeks as she almost face-bombed. Of course, the baker isn't the vigilante. Hell, he woke up really early for work, no way he had time to go out and be a vigilante. Momo chuckled and tried to ignore the blush across her cheeks. "Sorry, forgot I ran into you. I was not quite focused last night." She stepped forwards, eyes roving over the case of bread and desserts before her eyes widened and she focused on something particularly delicious, tucked into the far side of the case surrounded by cupcakes and brownies. "What is that?" It was massive, at least the size of her head across, and easily taller than her hand. Fluffy, crunchy pastry that reminded her of a cinnamon roll formed a large bowl, and inside the spiral was a strange cake-like layer of bright red and fluffiness, with a massive pile of creamy frosting and white chocolate-covered strawberry slices topping it, accented by shaved bits of dark chocolate that gleamed in the light. "Oh, that was an experiment from yesterday. I'm calling it the Red Death Roll." A massive cinnamon roll filled with an Italian Genoise-style red velvet cake batter and topped with a cream frosting and strawberries. "It's the result of spare ingredients and boredom before I opened." The baker chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head. "I want it." The words spilled out before she could stop it, cheeks burning even as she swallowed a bit of drool. Blinking, the baker grinned. "Sure. And you know what? You're new to the neighborhood, so let's say it's free." No, I couldn't possibly dash, she began, hands coming up to avoid the gesture. Relax, I wasn't going to sell it in the next half hour, and I'm not planning to chow down on that monster. You can use it and more effective than I ever could. The smile on his face was bright, and it almost distracted her from what he said as he pulled out the pastry and slid it into a pale green box with the store's logon on the lid. Keyword almost. More effective? She asked, letting a hint of suspicion and steel into her voice. Oh, I know you're Creati. Recognized you a few days ago when you got in, Izuku smiled. Bit of a shock. I keep up with the news, and I thought for sure you were heading to Kamino like some of the others now that your 3-year contract is up. He slid the package in front of her and grinned. Relax. I know how to keep my nerding out in private. Besides, with the gangs and villains around, I'm glad to see more heroes. Most of the people who live around here are old and retired, or young and trying to make things work. Lots of people who need protection, not a lot of heroes offering it. His face took a bittersweet twinge, and he shook his head. Ignore my rambling. Frowning, Momo reached out and pulled the box closer. I heard the crime rate was high, but is it that bad? No, not as much. Manuel and his crew have always tried their best, but it's only recently they've gotten a grip on the situation. Outnumbered, you see. Rumors that a vigilante took a big enough bite to shake out the big wigs around here, and the heroes struck when the iron was hot. Less people getting mugged, fewer villains around in general. The yaks are still there, but they've been here for centuries. Getting them out is harder than just fighting them off in the alleys. Lost in thought, Momo thanked him for the pastry. Let me know if you like it. I am, like, literally across the hall from you, if I'm not running around town or working here. She smiled and pushed out the door. The rain had gotten heavier, so tucking the boxed pastry under her arm and hefting her umbrella, she headed home. In her chest a fire burned brighter. A challenge. Just what I've been looking for. Behind her, surrounded by warmth and comfort of the bakery, Izuku smiled. Oh, you'll fit in around here just fine, Miss Creati. Stepping around the counter, he stepped up and, just as the clock on the wall chimed noon, he flipped his sign from open to closed. As he turned away, heading back to a room filled with dough and a large sheet of croissants, he muttered to himself. Just fine indeed. 1:45 p.m. Izuku stretched as he walked out of his apartment, his arms pulled taut above him as he shook the last of his midday nap from his system. His work outfit had been discarded in favor of slim-fit black jeans, Converse, and a thick green and black turtleneck, his jacket pulled loosely over it and his glasses sitting low on his nose. From the faint sounds he was picking up across the hall, Yaoyorozu had gotten in and started setting her apartment up. Grinning a bit at the mental image of her covered in dust and moving boxes around, a surprisingly casual image of the refined hero, he took off down the hall, hands sliding into his pockets as he headed out. As he stepped out into the rain, he grinned, letting the now faint sprinkling moisture fall across him and finish waking up, even as he took off at a jog back towards the Market Street area, before taking a turn north away from the plaza. Soon enough he turned down a smaller side street, grinning as he ducked under an ornate wall sconce into the small patio that sat outside of the bookstore. Makakusha 3, the third location of Japan's original anarchist bookstore. And where wisdom was born. He pushed through the crowded doorway and into the chaotic stacks of books and pamphlets. Izuku had started coming here in his first year of college, having tracked down a specific copy of a specific manual to check some math for a project. He still remembered his first glimpses of the place, of the faint scent of smoke and ash, of fresh ink from personal printers and the sharp tang of uncut paper brochures. "Granny show? You awake in here?" he called out, glancing around as he vaulted the coffee and ink-stained counter. "Boy, you here?" "Yeah, Granny here to help stock," Izuku called out, hanging his jacket behind the counter as he looked around, finally seeing the hunched figure of the proprietor. Silver hair pulled back in dreads with ornate beads and rings holding it in place hung around dark skin and pale silver-blue eyes. Her shoulders were covered by a denim vest so worn it was paler than her hair, only marked by patches and pins, and her cane, an ornate thing in the shape of a snake, was at her side. She was quirkless, one of the precious few people who knew who he was, But behind her aged appearance was the woman who taught him the beginning of who he was. So much can change in 4 years. A smile, full of bright teeth and her eyes squinting at him still made his spirits rise. "Ah, Aizu. Glad to see you made it." The old woman hobbled through the stacks, her cane tapping out her path as she ran her finger through the pamphlets and books around her. "I almost thought you had decided to stay and meet the new girl in your building." "Gran. I said I would come to help." Izuku's voice came out in a low whine as he hid his face on the counter, before smirking over his forearms at the old woman's unimpressed look. "Besides, Miss Creati is busy moving in still. No time for pleasantries." A hand raised and waved in an "oh what can you do" sorta gesture, and then he ducked as a hardbound chemistry textbook came flying at his head. "Stop it with the dramatics, kid. Get to the back and start carrying those books. These shelves ain't gonna stock MSlevs." She chuckled as she turned back to the shelves, but her eyes caught him as he gave a sarcastic salute. "As you say, Sylvie Master Show? Ducking another thrown book? Oh, research on arson rates in inner cities? Nice." He ducked around a nearby shelf and jogged back to the loading dock and back office, a grin on his face as he felt himself relax in the familiar space, good memories filling his spirit. After all, this was where Sho Alicia saved him from Quirk-induced insanity. Momo smiled, looking over her freshly cleaned and prepped room. The sun had barely come out, but the light made the horizon across the city burn a deep reddish gold, the light casting her room in bright contrast to how it looked earlier. While the place was still bare, things were now ready for her to unpack. Sighing in comfort, she wandered through the large apartment. A large bedroom with a corner view of the nearby intersection, with the nearest buildings, spread out just so that she could see the faint gleam. She stretched and yawned. Maybe she should just head to bed early? She mused on it, wandering around before seeing the still intact half of the pasty she had bought earlier. A blush came across her cheeks. The taste of the red velvet still lingered on her tongue as she liked her lips. Another slice wouldn't hurt, would it? Izuku set down the last empty box, the new books all set on a cart as he began pushing it into the main room, when he heard it. "Give me the cash box, you beach. I'm not FNG around." Sighing, Izuku set the cart aside and began strolling through the maze of shelves, footsteps quiet and hands hooked on his pockets as he peeked through a shelf to see a teen with a switchblade, hand shaking and loose silver hair visible around the hood. With a soft sigh, he began to take in the teen's data. 153 centimeters, 132 pounds. Underweight. Poor quality clothes. For days since they last ate. So he'll go easy on the kid. Gran groaned even as she started shuffling around the counter. "What do you think you're gonna get out of this, kid?" Shut up." Izuku stepped from the last corner and walked up slowly. "Just give me the money, please." Izuku's arm reached out, knuckles tapping into the kid's elbow and sliding up fast, squeezing the arm muscles with a knuckle and thumb and making a grip spasm as the kid screamed out in shock. With a sharp twist, Izuku grabbed the now falling Nai, Bali song, 7-inch handle, 5, blade, 4.31 ounces, Fei, fingers grabbing the now loose handle and flipping the sharp edge down and out of the way as he pulled it up and back, the handle folding and closing around the blade as he flicked his wrist. "Hi. Welcome to Makakusha. Do you want us to help you?" The teens spun around with fear in their eyes. Red eyes, a long spiral horn flowing up from a temple through silver-white hair. But what caught his eye was the patchwork of pale lines barely visible across her skin, all of her skin. It. He kept eye contact even as he slowly dropped to a knee, taking care to show he wasn't planning to attack her, even putting his eyesight about level to hers. He felt the stirring of anger, of disgust and rage and determination building in his heart, but he held it tight. "My name is Midoriya Izuku. Do you need help?" She blinked, tears pooling in her eyes as her breath caught, arms pulling back as she sobbed and choked. "Please." Izuku felt his heart ache and he smiled. He reached up, pulling his glasses off and glancing back to see Sho nod, before stepping back through a door to the side room. In his mind, numbers began to roll, and he felt his resolve click as the results came back. "Why is it that my quirk says that you could change the world?" Gently he pulled the sobbing girl closer, her crying becoming louder and her body shaking from emotion as he closed his eyes, feeling that familiar burn of tears building. If you can, then I'm going to make sure you can choose what you want. Around the door frame across the room, an old face smiled sadly at the sight of tears. That boy. So kind yet so jaded. I hope he can help you, kid. I don't want to see him break again. 7:23 p.m. The bookstore was locked up tight, shutters pulled across the windows, a closed sign up in the door, and all the locks barred and closed. In the back room, a table had been cleared, and a plate of sandwiches and a large pot of tea were steadily being consumed, mainly by the skittish young girl who had introduced herself as Kai. Her hoodie was open, revealing 2 worn and ragged shirts that had been stitched up haphazardly and a backpack that she wore flat under the jacket. At a glance, Izuku could take in that she was underweight. Her age, 13 years, 3 days. Her birthday was Saturday. She didn't know. Meant she was underweight, though at almost 170 centimeters tall, 168.56 centimeters, 169.30 centimeters with shoes. Thin soles, worn. She was well above average for height, but had the average weight, 49.6 kilograms, of someone a full head shorter than her. He could see her bones in some places. Swallowing some tea, he set the cup down and leaned back, chair balancing on one leg. It can take it. Blinking, he caught a side-eyed glare from Sho and pushed his quirk back from the forefront of his mind. He would still be quantifying things on reflex, he was too keyed up not to, but hopefully he could avoid prying into exact numbers for a while. Reaching behind him, he ran his fingertips along a bookshelf just out of reach and yanked a pamphlet off a stack. Tossing it on the table, he cringed when the girl snapped to focus, her red eyes staring at him with hurt and fear. Sorry, but you should read that. She glanced down at it and then back at him. Calmly, he raised his hands and put them flat on the table, watching as a small amount of tension eased from her shoulders. She pulled the pamphlet towards herself and frowned at the title. From his angle, he could make out her slowly tracing the kanji and mouthing dash. She was barely able to read. He glanced at Sho and saw her eyes glaze in anger, even as she kept her body loose and affable. He could hear her rant as if it was fresh in his mind. Language is the heart of the masses, kid. It's the history of the people, the knowledge and memories of dead men and long-lost artists. Everyone should read. Should grab a book and fill a shelf as a monument to the people who made them, who took the time to decide to share. Books are the greatest form of heroism in my eyes. He cursed and sighed. If you can't read then, I'll say what it says. Okay. A long moment of focus. She kept her eyes on his body, on the anger and grief that emanated off his form. Fine. Please. He sighed and closed his eyes, reciting from memory. The Art of the Wanderer. A survival guide for a modern nomad in a big city dash. What's nomad mean? Kai's sharp tone cut across him and he answered without hesitation. A person with no set location to call home. Written by Old Hayes and his buddies on the causeway. Old Hayes? Nickname, keeps people from hunting him down if they don't know him. The book has 4 parts. Food, shelter, profit and law. We'll go through them one by one, if that's okay? Yes. Yes. Please. Again, anger bloomed in his chest, but with a sharp focus to cut through it, he kept his voice slow and steady. And for a while, the only sound was him reciting the book while Kai asked questions and sought clarifications. It became quickly apparent that despite not being very literate, Kai was intelligent. She asked sharp questions, asked, why this and not this, brought up bits and pieces of anecdotes and how various parts of the pamphlet would apply. It made him want to smile. It made him want to hunt down whoever hurt her and rip their tongue out. Instead, he focused on being engaging. Leaning forward slightly, but leaving his body language open and relaxed. By the time the pot of tea was refilled, he was deep in a conversation about location management and whether security or hospitality was more important. Eventually they agreed that security would be a preference if you had an active enemy, but hospitality was required for long-term locations. As the two of them sat back, the faint chuckle from Sho grabbed his attention. Hey kid, she asked. What? What? Both Izuku and Kai glanced at each other, Having both spoken, the younger one boy, sighing, Izuku mimed, zipping his mouth shut to the girl's grim amusement, before they focused back on the older woman. You are being hunted. I can tell. And sadly I can't let you stay here. There's not enough room. Izuku blinked and narrowed his eyes. You old dash. You can stay with the boy, she declared in that sage voice that made him almost immediately want to object. Leaning in close, Izuku hissed out his complaint while the girl blinked and looked around confused and unsure. Sho, I have a pro hero living next door. Do you not think that maybe having a 13-year-old girl living in my apartment would be noticed? Well, you were planning to keep being a vigilante, so why not? And you have that spare room where you've been keeping that weeb collection. Izuku threw up his hands and leaned back, shoving back the incredulity of her statement. That they're collectibles. But she had a point. Hey, Kai. He waited until the girl focused on him, feeling his empathy surge as the teen girl had her arms crossed. I own an apartment nearby, and I have a spare room. If you want, it's there for you to use. No questions asked if you come or go. She stared, and Izuku could feel the tension build. She barely knew him or Sho. Hell, less than an hour ago she was trying to rob the store. Reaching into his pocket, he tossed the bally song up and over, the latch undone and the blade flashing as it swung free, a click and clack of the two grips closing and echoing even as, with a faint thunk of metal on wood, it landed straight up to her side. There's your knife, by the way. She glanced at it and then to Izuku with calculation in her eyes. Teach me how to do that. Is that a yes? If you teach me to fight, then yes. I am done being a victim. For a moment, Izuku saw something, a memory or a ghost of some sort. A teenager with green hair and black eyes staring in a mirror, blood dripping from his lips. As it faded, he nodded. Teach you. For a moment, it almost looked like she smiled. 8:23. Momo sighed as the sun finished setting, sitting on the floor of her room with a box of takeout in hand as she picked at noodles and shrimp. Sighing slightly, she looked out at the empty room and felt as if the bare walls were all too relevant to her recent experience as a hero. For 3 years she had felt like a makeup doll, wearing one product then another, often in revealing outfits and far too artsy poses. It was not something she enjoyed. Beyond that, the sheer stress of listening to the stories the others told, she felt so far behind. Shudo was number he had done that with controlled, massive ice formations and a solid reputation as an efficient, if somewhat unapproachable hero. His record spoke for itself, an impressive collection of successful rescues and quick detainments. Bakugo was right behind him as number 15, driven by that angry focus that frightened her more than once. The rest of her class spread throughout the top 100, with members of the B class alongside them. Ito was in the city with her, and had taken his brother's position as the local hero, with Tensei taking over as mission control and the moral and tactical spine of the Idaitan Hero Agency. Meanwhile, she had been living at home with her parents and working in fashion and high-class boutiques, with even scheduling time to go out and patrol a fight against contracts and PR reps a hassle, she had felt. As if she was slowly losing that edge she once had in UA. She hoped that this would be a chance for a change of pace. 8:41 p.m. Izuku and Kai, who had her hoodie zipped up, strolled down the still wet streets in the late afternoon light. On top of that, Izuku had tossed her a thick woolen green beanie before they left, helping her hide her distinctive silver-white hair. Okay, we don't have time for a lot of shopping, but I know where to find a few things. First off, the pharmacy on the corner here. Get whatever you want. I would suggest shampoo, soap, toothpaste, and such. Hair things as well. Then we'll hit the thrift store to get you some day-to-day clothes that aren't rags. He glanced to see her raise an eyebrow and paused. That you need more than just cleaning stuff, don't you? Yeah? I am a teenage girl. F-. 8:56 p.m. Izuku eyed the shelves of products, and then glanced down at his phone and the list he had found on a single father's help site. Pads, heating pad, pain pills. Izuku muttered as he checked down the list. Caramel. I need caramel. Kai interjected. Trust me on this. Will do. Adding it to his mental list, Izuku began to grab and check the supplies he needed, comparing prices and sizes with Quantify. As they started heading out, he ignored the questioning eyes of the cashier and headed out, Kai at his side. Alright, now clothes. You need shirts, pants, shoes, and a better jacket. Izuku mused. I also need underwear. Quantify blipped with relevant information on size, and Izuku had to try and fight down a blush of surprise. Yeah, we can do that. Kai nodded and crossed her arms, a faint red hue to her cheeks. 9:34 p.m. Hello. Welcome to Gigamart. Would you dash? The blonde-haired employee was quickly interrupted mid-obligatory greeting. We're fine, thank you. Izuku cut her off as he led Kai into the supermarket, hands in his pocket. The bags from the pharmacy had been stashed at the bakery closer to home until he and Kai headed back to his apartment. Izuku glanced around and eyed size listings and pointed Kai the right direction. Grab those ones and test the fit. Find what you need and we'll head out. He tried to keep the faint pulse of a blush from showing, while Kai all but ran to the racks of bras and underwear. A woman next to him chuckled, Your daughter? Blinking, Izuku scrambled for the first answer in mind. Niece, actually. My older brother is busy with business for a while, and she lost a bag on her flight over. Ah, poor thing. You should relax, though. I think you'll do fine. She gave a kind smile and continued on past him, a young girl sitting half asleep in her cart. Surprisingly, that comment did help. He let the tension flow out of his body as he leaned back against a dividing wall, glancing up a moment later as Kai stepped out of the changing room. She had 3 bundles in one hand and handed 2 others to the attendant as her red eyes checked that he was still there. Izuku nodded and glanced at the teen girls section nearby, raising an eyebrow. Returning a raised eyebrow, Kai shrugged, and they met back up, before they went into the teen boys section where the girl walked to the pants and jackets area. Izuku was satisfied with that. He would let her choose her own wardrobe. 20 minutes later, they stepped out with 3 bags of clothes that fit Kai, and she was munching on a Snickers bar. You good? He asked, pulling out a mint chocolate bar for himself as the two of them headed for the bakery, and from there home. Yeah. You're cool. Izuku smiled and bit off a chunk of chocolate. Good to know, kid. I'll swear. Breathing deep, Hiro pushed through the wooden doors to the smoky room, the faint dark brown hair of his boss gleaming in the half-light even as golden eyes tracked his entrance. More and more, his boss had pushed his men, spreading his forces thin to find the key to his success. Did you find the girl? The curt question was familiar, and after tensing, Hiro gave his answer, knowing it would put his life at risk. No. She is still missing and we lost the hunting team in Hosu several days ago. Hiro flinched at the shout of anger, a glass of sake thrown and smashed against the far wall. Damn it. For years. The girl has been missing for 4 goddamn years. A crack of wood from under the grip of the speaker caused him to stop. Shifting, he lifted his hand from the surface, flexing it. With a touch and a series of crackling sparks, the wood warped back into its original form. He reached up and rubbed at the bridge of his nose, just above his Black Plague mask. The League has been harassing us, and we've almost run out of our stock of suppression bullets. We have months left before we start losing ground. Pacing, the dark-haired figure clenched and unclenched his fists as he considered his next move. Flood Hosu with our men. Avoid the deluded heroes and focus on bringing me the girl. We no longer have the pleasure of subtly being an option. Chisaki Kai, better known as Overhaul, glared at his subordinate. And if you fail me again, I will make you wish. I killed you. Understand? A dry swallow. Of course, sir. Izuku blinked awake as Quantify pinged and groaned, shoving himself up and off the messy couch that he had kept from his college dorm when he moved. He liked this couch, it was comfy. He didn't like sleeping on it. It always gave him a crick in his neck. Regardless, he stretched and looked around the apartment, seeing the small pile of shopping bags that Kai and him had collected sitting on the kitchen counter. Beyond that, he can see the clock. For him, he stood to get ready for work and paused. Ah, shit. What the hell was he supposed to do with Kai? Was she going to follow him to the bakery? To stay here? To go to the bookstore? He glanced over at the sound of shifting cloth to see the teen twisted up into a bundle in his bedsheets. As he rubbed the back of his neck, Two red eyes blinked wearily at him. "Why are you awake?" Her voice was thick with exhaustion and comfort, and Izuku made his choice. He moved across the room and sat at her side, meeting her tired red gaze with his relaxed green and a soft smile. "I'm gonna head to work. I'll be back in a few hours, and I'm leaving my number and contact information on the fridge. Get some sleep." Where you work?" The teen wiggled back under some blankets as she started drifting back to sleep. "Bakery nearby. I'll bring home something to eat." He spoke softly, but by the time he was done, she had already headed back to the realm of dreams and slumber. Sighing at how young she looked like that, with the guarded face she wore the day before missing, he gave her hair a soft ruffle, avoiding her horn, and stood. It was the work of a few minutes to grab a pair of slacks, a nice pastel green long-sleeve button-up and a black undershirt, and his apron. He took a quick shower, keeping it as quiet as possible, and left a note on the door as he slipped out of the apartment. Several hours later, Momo hid a yawn as she watched the last of her boxes get set down, smiling and signing the clipboard the movers handed her. "Thank you so much for your help." "Of course, Yaoyorozu-sama. Have a pleasant day." The gentleman waved and he and his crew took off, leaving her to the unenviable task of unboxing her home. She glanced around, eyeing how her furniture had all been placed and set where she had wanted it, some of it still wrapped in dust covers and plastic sheets to keep the wood and metal from scratching or scuffing. With careful movements, she started cutting away the plastic wrap, getting her closet and its organizers unwrapped first, before moving onto the desk in her small office space and the shelves and filing cabinets she used to keep track of paperwork. When everything was finally unwrapped, she walked the box of plastic down to the building dumpster and glanced at the time. Nearly 10 a.m., and she was only barely started. She headed up to her apartment and got to work on the first few boxes, unboxing her closet and wardrobe. As she hung the last of the clothes and hung them up, she smiled, stepping back to see how it all fit. She stretched and glanced at the next pile of boxes, and then blushed as her stomach growled. She still hadn't done more than grab takeout when she went shopping last night, mainly because she only just got her fridge installed earlier this morning. As she glanced around her kitchen, she saw the empty pie pan sitting in her trash and paused, glancing at her phone's clock. Almost 11:30. I should have time, right? She looked down at her outfit, judging that her older jeans and loose purple t-shirt would be more than acceptable, and snagging a loose shawl from her closet to keep warm, before she headed down, dropping off the new stack of flattened boxes in the dumpster before heading out. It was only about 10 minutes later that she walked through the market square, the bright and comforting green of the bakery's sign gleaming ahead of her across the still damp grass and pavement of the library and street. She glanced through the window as she approached, and had to stifle a laugh. The green-topped form of her neighbor was dancing, head bopping and feet shuffling as he swept and spun, the faint beat of a radio pounding through the glass of the window as he moved to the beat. With a smile, she slowly pushed the door open, hearing the quick-paced lyrics of some sort of English song. As the door swung back, she reached up and muffled the small metal bell by catching its hammer, letting the door close without making a noise that could be heard above the flowing beat of the song. Feeling when things could look black. That nothing could possibly go wrong. He spun, leaving the broom standing as he did, before catching it, eyes closed. This has been a most unusual day. Love has made me see things in a different way. She watched as he swayed back and forth, performing exaggerated dance moves, before she couldn't hold back, and started giggling, hiding her laughter behind her hand. He jerked and glanced at her, a blush on his cheeks, and a smile wide and happy. "Yaoyorozu-san. A pleasure to see you." "I apologize for interrupting." Momo felt flushed, cheeks red from laughing and smiling at the joyous baker. "No, by all means. It's been a slow day, and I am always willing to serve." He tossed the broom into a corner behind the counter as he slid behind the register. "How did the roll taste?" "It was exceedingly delicious." Momo smiled and shivered as she remembered the taste. "However, I still have not finished getting my kitchen in order. As such, can I get 2 loaves of that multigrain bread, and some of those cinnamon maple bear claws? Let's say half a dozen." "Absolutely." With deft hands, the pastries were boxed up and 2 paper bags filled with bread were added to make a bundle. And if you do need something to go on the bread, Jin's Market on the corner has got some great local cheese and cured meats, part of his partnership with Shurji, the butcher. Izuku smiled as he slid the bundle into a paper bag, the shop's logo in deep green against the paper. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Midoriya-san. Anytime. And with a ring of the doorbell, she headed out to finish her grocery shopping. Izuku sighed as the hero stepped outside and smiled. The fact she had come in while he was doing his best Gene Kelly impression was somewhat embarrassing. But he was glad she seemed happy. He thought of that shiver she had given when she mentioned the Red Death, and felt his cheeks glow. If she gets happy about the pastry, I need to give her more, if only for the floor show. Shaking his head to clear his musings, he rushed to finish up the last few bits of business before closing. Yaoyorozu was his last customer of the day, and as he picked up a few loaves of a cheesy Asiago and herb bread and a few muffins, he locked up and hit the lights. With his cooler bag of baked goods slung across his back, he also grabbed a cardboard box from the back filled with stacks of bread from the last few days. With his loot in hand, it was only a minute's walk to reach the market, seeing Yaoyorozu was still wandering the small collection of aisles and coolers. The ring as he passed through the door alerted Gene, the elderly man smiling as he greeted him. Aizu. Glad to see ya, my boy. How'd business go today? The long gray and black ponytail swing as the thin man stepped from his counter and gave Izuku a pat on the shoulder, grinning. Went just fine, Gene. Just grabbing some more fruit and veg and dropping off my spares for my day off. You have my usual order? That I do. Just give me a moment to grab it. Feel free to see what grabs your eyes. Of course. As Gene wandered through the door behind his counter, Izuku set the cardboard box next to the counter and wandered back into the aisles, heading for the coolers. He strode past Yaoyorozu with a quick grin as she wandered past him with a basket of fruit and some containers of granola and cereal. It was only a minute or so to find the milk he preferred and a small carton of eggs. Finishing up his look around, he wandered back to see Yaoyorozu finishing up at the register and Gene setting a milk crate filled with vegetables and fruits next to his cooler bag. Thank you. Come again. With a wave, Gene handed Yaoyorozu her receipt and turned to Izuku. This all for the day, Aizu? Should be. You going to come to play tomorrow? There was a defeated groan as Gene rubbed his jaw. I have to cover the shop. But I'll cheer you on from the porch if we're slow. Works for me. Have a nice afternoon, Gene. Moving everything into his cooler bag, Izuku waved goodbye as he headed out, trekking his way towards home and seeing Yaoyorozu trying to adjust her bags as she walked. Grinning, Izuku swept in and lifted the bags in her offhand, throwing her a smile. Want some help? Blinking, black eyes stared before she smiled. Much appreciated, Midoriya-san. As they started walking, Izuku glanced up and smiled at how the clouds had started to break up. It's nice that the storm's passing. Oh. Yeah. Tomorrow is the local basketball night at the library lot. He grinned and bumped her shoulder slightly. You should swing by if you're free. It's one of the better ways to meet the local neighborhood. Momo frowned slightly in thought. I'm not much of a sports fan, but I do want to meet people, she hummed. Do you think I should show up in my hero uniform? Izuku blinked and nodded back and forth, biting his lip. That I would say no. Let them know you as the cute new girl on the block before they know you as the amazing Creati. He glanced past the edge of his glasses as Yaoyorozu flushed slightly, reaching up to tuck her hair back. I'll think on it. Thank you, Midoriya-san. Any time, he smiled and glanced up. And here's our stop. She grinned. What? No home sweet home? Without waiting for a reply, she held the door open, letting Izuku walk through with his burdens. Now, I may be the epitome of the cozy inner-city boy, but even I have standards, pro hero. Izuku gave a chuckle and tapped the button for their top floor. And I happen to draw the line at sounding too much like a Hallmark card outside of work. She giggled, and Izuku fought down the stare that drew at him. Oh, why God do I have it bad for cute and smart girls? Thankfully that public speaking class helped with the stuttering. That and the frat parties. College may have been hectic, but those are some valuable life skills. As the elevator closed, Izuku was struck by a flash of worry, and spoke up. Oh, I also have a guest staying at my place for a few weeks. My younger cousin is staying with me for a while. Her house got caught in a villain attack and so she's chilling with me. Oh, is she okay? The surprised and worried look on Yaoyorozu's face was genuine, and Izuku felt bad about playing off it. But he had priorities. Yeah, her name's Kai, but she's pretty shy. She's also alone in the mornings, so do you mind keeping an ear out for if anything happens? Of course. I can't guarantee I'll always be in to check in on her, but I'm more than willing to help. Izuku grinned, glancing up as the doors opened to their floor. I'm glad. Thank you, Yaoyorozu-san. They walked quietly down the hall before Yaoyorozu pulled out her keys and fiddled with her lock. As he followed her through the door, he glanced around and took in the boxes stacked around her living room, and followed her through the open living dining area of the apartment. Feel free to set the bags on the counter there, and thank you so much for your help, Midoriya-san. Anytime, Yaoyorozu-san. With a bow, Izuku left her to her unpacking and closed her door behind him, crossing the hall and sliding into his apartment to the faint sound of the TV in the living room being on. Sup? The voice came from the bundle of blankets on the couch, white hair and a red horn poking out. On the coffee table in front of it, a plate with a half-eaten sandwich sat. Good afternoon, Kai. Morning go okay? Boring. Are you gonna teach me fighting tonight? Kai's voice came out somewhat cautious, somewhat pleading, and Izuku slowed, halfway through unbuttoning his work shirt. You know what? I think so. Give me a few minutes to get changed. And you go grab some actual clothes. He glanced over as her eyes focused on him. I'm gonna teach you how to hit somebody hard enough to knock him out. He laughed when in her rush to get clothes she caught herself on the blanket and face planted on the carpet, before helping her up. And I guess how to fall without hurting yourself. Izuku led Kai down the apartment's fire escape, the pair stepping off into the back alley before he guided the young teen to an old door that was tucked away. The sign was old, paint peeling as it advertised, Lee's Fight Club. From his pocket, he pulled a key and unlocked the door, letting Kai wander in, her eyes darting around in interest even as Izuku locked and closed the door behind them. So, what is this place? Izuku's response was to flip the switch at his side, turning the lights on. The air was cast in a soft gold, old wire bulb lights far above casting a dim light through the dust-filled air to reveal an aged boxer's ring. Heavy bags lined the far wall while free weights sat on racks and bars across from them. This is Lee's. This is where I learned how to fight. In the center of the room, two large spaces were cleared. The first was a raised boxer's ring, the iconic roped lines surrounding the stage-like platform. The other was a large flat pit, just below the level of the floor, filled with sand that had been raked into a large intricate series of spirals. And the air is really dusty. That's because it's abandoned. Or, well, was abandoned. Izuku stepped forwards with a casual air, slowly flexing as he loosened up and turned to the teen. Come on. I'm going to show you some stretches. We'll make training a lot easier. As Izuku began to twist his shoulders around, Kai joined him. At his advice, she was wearing only a slender tank top, black sweats, and sneakers. Izuku himself was wearing a comfortable pair of hakama, split-shoe shoes, and a tight green shirt. First, the shoulders. The two began to move, Izuku leading Kai through each motion a dozen times and helping her stance whenever she shifted it wrong. By the time they were done stretching, Kai already looked somewhat exhausted, clearly unused to such a thorough workout, but there was a glint of determination in her eyes as she bit out words between heavy breaths. What the next? Izuku nodded and stepped from the wooden flooring onto the recessed sand pit, ignoring how his feet disturbed the pattern. He wasn't doing his usual combat and acrobatics practice as it was. Come here. I'm going to teach you how to take a fall. Kai nodded and stepped into the pit. The first lesson is that you don't want to stop moving when you hit the ground. He slowly reached out and shoved, making sure to throw her gently, while torquing her torso so she was off balance before she hit the sand, barely avoiding coming to a crumpled heap. Hey! Shoving herself up angrily, the teen stared at the baker. I told you. Don't stop moving. Roll with it. You have to feel the impact and let it go. Watch. Kicking off, he threw himself at the ground before shifting, the heavy impact of his shoulder and arm only helping him as he torqued up and around, coming to sit on his knees in the sand, ignoring how his hair became covered in sand. When you hit the ground, you have a lot of energy. Weight, momentum, the push that sent you that way. While going limp is good if you have no other choice, learning to roll off an impact is important. He stepped up and forwards and shoved Kai to the side, sending her crashing to the sand only for her to scrabble and push back, almost catching herself. Nope. You have to roll. Staying like that means I would get to kick you. He demonstrated by tapping his toes lightly against her ribs. Come on, Kai, I thought you wanted to learn to fight. Work with me. She growled and lunged up, and Izuku merely twisted, hand against her shoulder as he shoved her past him, foot tripping the younger girl. But when she hit the ground, she let herself bounce and shift, coming back around with an angry growl. There it is. Come on again. For the next hour, it went much like this. Kai would lunge or stand, breathing or even step back and away. And Izuku would shove her, throw her, trip her. Soon Kai was rolling into her falls out of necessity, coming up and leaping back just as fast as she went down, until she finally staggered and fell spread eagle on the sandy floor. Ha! F-ISEK at this. Izuku shook his head, the latest bunch of sand falling loose as he shoved his hands in his pockets. Nah, you're actually doing better than I expected. Normally, it takes a few days before people start fighting back. Took me nearly a week. She blinked up, red eyes focusing in confusion. A week? Yeah. I didn't like fighting and was a bit of a wallflower. I only got motivated to fight if I got really upset. Izuku shook his head. I've gotten better, but my first instinct isn't really to hit someone unless I feel they deserve it. Or in sparring. Kai breathed deep and sighed. Fine. So I'm doing good. Are we going to keep sparring? Nah, you're tired enough that it would hurt more than it would teach. Get up, shake yourself off. I'm gonna do a quick exercise myself before we head back. Walking across the gym to a small cooler, Izuku pulled out a bottle of water and underhanded it across the room to the teen. What exercise? I'll work on some hitting, I think. Let you see how someone should stand when throwing a punch. As Kai hopped up to sit on the edge of the stage, Izuku stepped up to a heavy bag, reaching out to pull on a pair of padded MMA gloves from a shelf. As he set his feet and leaned in, he exhaled. And then he began to punch, letting his quirk flow even as he threw hit after hit. In his mind, numbers flashed with each strike. The force of the impact, the speed of the punch, the likelihood that he would break things. He varied as he went, from heavy slow punches that lashed out and set the bag swinging slightly on its chain, to rapid smacks of his fist that rang out like gunfire, but only jerked the bag. As Kai watched on, Izuku worked. Momo sighed and stretched before her phone chimed. Blinking as she checked it, she found a new message. Jairu, hey, Mo, you free tonight? Me and some of the girls are meeting up. Wanna come with? Momo glanced around, biting her lip nervously as she took in the last few unopened boxes, but they could wait. Momo, sure. When and where? Momo breathed out slowly as her cab came to a stop. She had switched out from her cleaning clothes to a stylish white dress shirt and black blazer, her jeans replaced by another long pleated skirt. This one is a bright blue color. As she wound her hair back into a braid, she frowned. It's been a few weeks since I've chatted with the girls. I don't even know what's happening anymore. She breathed deeply and pushed down the nerves rising in her stomach. It's fine, I'll go out, have a drink, relax, and be back tonight. Nothing will go wrong. She breathed out and shrugged on her purse. A moment to call her usual cab service, and she headed down to the lobby. Kai chewed her mouthful of ramen, sitting at Izuku's small dining room table with a faint scowl. So you head out, beat up gangsters, and save people, but you aren't a hero? Izuku glanced up, a small wrench in his mouth as his hands fiddled with a canister. Mumbling, he nodded in it. Sorta, kinda fashion. That's stupid. Another nod, as a click rang out and something on the canister shifted. So, what are you doing? Reaching up, Izuku pulled the wrench from his mouth and used it to twist a gear-like segment of the cylinder. Collapsible staves. Easy to conceal. They're not the most durable weapon, but they work well enough and I can carry more than a few without issue. He held up the cylinder, showing how the pin on one end held a spring in check. The gear had been to increase the tension, loading it for use. What other tools do you use? A bit of everything. I carry a knife but I don't fight with it usually. A set of these staves, a chain or two, and a couple flashbangs are my usual gear. If I have time I can prep more intensive gear. Aside from weapons, he reached up his sleeve and pulled down an armband, before flipping it inside out to show a collection of lockpicks. Lockpicks like this, wires, radio jammers, USB cloners. Most of them I can make myself, for a couple bucks of hardware. Flipping the band back around, he slid it back up his arm, nestling it around his bicep below his shoulder. Kai nodded, munching on more rice as she seemed to contemplate things. Izuku had turned back to priming another stave for combat when she spoke. Can you teach me? How to use all of them? He glanced up, eyebrows raised, a new tension pin in his mouth and glasses pushed up, letting him focus on some precision work. He pulled out the pin from and slid it home, humming slightly. It'll take time. Months, if not longer, before you get even passable. I'll put in the effort. I just don't want to be weak. Not again. Izuku nodded, face solemn. Then you won't. I promise. As the car pulled up, Momo thanked the driver and stepped out into the brightly colored district. Smiling, she stepped up into the usual place for the girls of the hero course. The vibrant sound. Bright neon lights flashed as she opened the door, the sound of singing and the beat of music washing out the sounds of the street. She waved at the attendant and walked out into the karaoke bar itself. Dozens of small, round tables surrounded a dance floor that dominated the center of the area, while soundproofed rooms lined the far wall for private occasions. Hyuka had been the one to first suggest the location, citing both the music selection and the acoustics. Each person could run up on stage and join the actual house band, the Echo Front. They would play each song live, and their lead singer, who Hyuka may have once had a fling with after graduation, would help sing back up. Mina had seconded the location the moment she had heard about the dance floor. After they had first hit up the bar in their first few months as heroes, it had become almost a monthly thing. The girls who had graduated from the hero course, and even the support and general courses, would get together and go out to de-stress. Glancing around, Momo grinned at seeing the familiar bright pink of Mina on the dance floor, already twisting and breakdancing to a growing ring of fans. She looked towards the upper railing where the larger booths of the building overlooked the dance floor, and caught sight of the lean form of Hyuka, who gave a wave, and pointed up to her side. Smiling, Momo pushed through the crowd before taking the stairs up to the balcony. She pushed through the door just in time to catch a hug from Itsuka, who was already showing the rosy coloring that said she had been drinking. Yamamo. Glad to see you. How have you been? Smiling, she squeezed her friend in a tight hug and they started back towards the booth, Uraraka and Tsu waving from where they were cuddling in the back corner. Another table had Setsuna and some of the other Class B alumni, Yui and Yoroi. Judging by the sway of a dress, they also had Toru over there as well. Fine, Itsuka. Just moving around, getting settled in with my new agency. Wait, you got out of your contract? Hyuka blinked, holding out a beer even as she sat down. Oh, I got out of my contract. It was 3 years, not a day more. She smirked and took a swig, happy that Hyuka remembered her favorite brand. I am a free woman, and have carte blanche to go kick butt and take names. Who? Go Momo. Uraraka grinned, toasting as the rest of the table joined in. Thanks. I'm setting up over in Hosu for now. Gonna stretch my legs a bit before going national like the boys. Oh, that's a mood, Tsu chirped up, the aquatic hero sipping from a colorful cocktail. I can't imagine how much stress Todoroki and Bakugo have to face. At least I only have to deal with coastal issues as part of my contracts. God, I know, right? Better them than us. They can have the big ones, we'll keep the peace. Uraraka grinned. It's not like they get more money than us, not in our field of business. The girls gave a cheer. Momo felt herself relax, unwinding with her friends. Izuku glanced at Kai, shrugging the form concealing loose black jacket over his turtleneck. Keep the doors locked and the phone close. I'll be back in about 4 hours. Come back safe? Please? I mean, who's gonna train me otherwise? Izuku paused before darting forwards and musing up Kai's hair, making her yelp. Relax, Squirt. I'll be fine. Pulling the cowl over his head, he finished by sliding the bright gold-lensed mask over his eyes and headed out the window. It was only minutes of darting across eaves and alleys before he felt comfortable. He took a moment, dropping down on the marquee of the local theater before he reached into the shadows of the now-playing boards. Amid the tangle of the board's electronics, he found and pressed a slim button for 3 seconds. A beep echoed into the earpiece he wore. He pulled out his vigilante phone, the slender black case made of machined titanium. A few taps and he was pulling up the wiretap. Unlike his computer setup from the much bigger fight a few days ago, this was only a receiver. He could hear but not speak. It would clone and copy any emergency service calls and the local dispatch for the cops, all funneled through the hidden antenna and to his headset. The only issue was range. It did help break up his patrols though. He would spend 2 hours in one district before closing down that antenna and moving to the second and repeating this process. As he slid his phone away, the beep of a new alert came up and the emergency call began. Oh God, there's a fight going on over in Dash. Izuku was already moving, leaping up to the rooftops as he took off, quantify, pinging him with locations and footholds as he moved. He loved this. The chill of the night air, the burn of the exercise, and the echo of his quirk. Words to the wise. Criminals should stay in tonight. Elsewhere. The man choked on blood, staring up at the masked figure who had pinned him to the wall. Listen, I'll tell you everything, all right? I swear. Just ask anything you want to know. Old June knows it, yeah? He'll let you know. A picture was pulled from the center figure's jacket, held up. Have you seen this girl? On it, a young girl with silvery white hair and red eyes stared out with anger. Written on it was a single name. June breathed deep and nodded slowly. Yeah, I know her, he swallowed. Saw her about a week ago. The three figures shared a glance. Before the center one crouched, eyes staring through the lenses of his simple white mask. From his left, the hooded figure with a loose black trenchcoat held his hand up, picking at staples that held his skin in place, while the scaled hand of the rag-covered man on the right scraped along a long and chipped blade, seemingly uninterested. Good. The League of Villains does pay its favors back handsomely. Where did you see her? As June began to speak, the masked man nodded. He had a lead, if not the girl's location itself. He nodded amicably before standing up. Wonderful. Thank you for your help. Shaking out his hands, the man turned and began to stride away. So I can go. June called out, before blinking. Where was the blue light coming? He never even screamed before his world was nothing but blue fire. Help. And that's my cue. Wisdom shifted his run, veering from the ledge he was heading for, and moved to another, which was overlooking a smaller side alley. He jumped up to the eaves, Mind and Quirk already giving him a clear direction. Below him, a tall man in a dirty shirt was shoving a young woman against the wall, clearly with bad intentions. As Izuku tipped over the edge, he kicked off. His descent wasn't slowed, so much as directed, steps off the wall and windowsills twisting him as he dropped, before he landed on the attacker's shoulders, knees around his neck to keep him from twisting on impact as the force of his fall sent the man to his knees. The crack of kneecaps against the ground drew a choked-out scream even as Izuku squeezed his thighs to choke the man out. The man began to reach up, trying to grapple, before with a sway, he just collapsed. Loosening his thighs from the man's carotid artery, Wisdom pulled out a zip tie and tied the man's wrists behind his back. Evening, ma'am. Are you suffering from any bruises, cuts, scrapes, or other injuries? But the woman was tall, with bright blue hair, and her skin was shimmering with fine scales. If you are, I would suggest staying here after calling the cops and filing a report for assault, battery, harassment, and attempted RPE. Izuku's voice was practiced. Calm enough to settle, but stern enough to get attention. As the lady nodded and reached up to her arm, where bright bruises were starting to form, she agreed. Wonderful. He should be unconscious for at least 10 minutes, And the cops should be 5 away at most. I hope your night goes better. And a word to the wise, Izuku began to climb the walls, leaping from sill to sill as he raised his voice cheerfully. Pepper spray solves a lot of problems. As he flipped off one ledge, he did a handspring off the edge of a roof and twisted out of sight. Above him, the first drops of rain began to fall. Momo snickered as she watched the amazing sight of ponies singing American rap songs on the stage. The tall blonde had more than made up for her original issue with the Japanese language, but her sheer vigor for English made her an expert with American or British music. Beside her, Jiro was mouthing along and swaying to the beat, while the dance floor was scattered with the rest of their crew. Ashido was the center attraction of the dancers, however, popping and locking just before the center stage as the music pulsed. While the booths the UA alumni had claimed now held a small forest of empty glasses, Jiro's included, Momo had never been drawn to drinking in excess, her fingertips slowly tracing circles around the rim of a cosmopolitan. While she could see the clear signs of drunkenness throughout the bar, she also knew that most of them had come in with cabs and had planned for this level of intoxication. As the song ran down, the crowd erupted into cheers, and Jiro slumped against Momo's side where they sat. God, I love Pony. She's awesome. You're awesome. I'm glad you made it out here. Thanks. I'm happy to be here. I enjoy seeing you all on occasion. As they cuddled closer, Momo gave a soft smile. Jiro was a cuddly drunk, and it always made her feel loved and appreciated. She breathed out slowly and adjusted her seat so the now dozing punk could lay across her lap. As the next song played, Momo glanced up to see that the band was doing its own music for a few minutes, and as the soothing tones of a musical rang out, Momo could almost laugh. It seemed like a day for Gene Kelly. Singing in the rain. Oh, singing in the rain. Wisdom leaned against the wall at the end of the alley, back to the street and his gleaming goggles glinting in the neon and rain of the alley. Pleasant night for a walk. But you don't look like you're here for a night of drinking. The taller man with blonde hair and the long beak-like mask looked back down the alley. And even in the rain, the blood made Izuku sick. There had been a couple of homeless people here, he had spoken with them before. And now, a dozen men in plague doctor masks and rough clothes had slaughtered them. Among the group of villains, one stood out. His clothes were nicer, under a thick black trench coat as they were. His blonde hair was damp and heavy, but the long katana at his side was still sheathed unlike the bloodied staves and knives of the rest of the crew. Hello, Vigilante-san. We were just ridding the streets of some filth. We're looking for someone after all. You wouldn't happen to know about a young girl, silver hair, huh? As the 6 gangsters spread out, readying weapons, Wisdom had eyes for only one of them. 84.34% chance this man will try to kill me to get to Kai. As he stepped from the wall, he twisted his wrists, 2 of the spring-loaded canisters slipping to his grasp. Sorry, but that doesn't ring a bell. I bet the cops will happily talk to you about it. I can even give you a nice cell to sit. The name's Wisdom. And yours? The blonde nodded slowly, before speaking. Ah, manners. Wonderful. I'm Toya Setsuno of the Shai Hasaikai. Are you sure you don't know anything? 'Cause I would hate to kill you when you could just tell me what I want to know. Wisdom gave a shrug. I think I'll keep silent. It'll be a surprise. As the rain came down, the 2 sides tensed. And with the distant honk of a car horn, the fighting began. Steel flashed out, the katana held by Toya a flickering razor, as it met the spin of a stave in Wisdom's fingers, the impact clashing in the rain. The fight had been going on for only a few minutes, and even now Toya could see the sheer difference in skill between Wisdom and the general thug of the Shai Hasakai. His crew was blooded, practiced, and well-trained. And now most of them were either passed out, or trying to recover from the myriad of broken legs and arms. And this FNG vigilante was starting to PSS him the F off. Snarling, he swung his sword back and around, focusing on the stave, only for it to be released, dropping to the ground just as his quirk reached for it, before a snap kick sent it up, clashing off the blade and breaking his focus. Some FNG how the FNG vigilante had figured out his quirk's limits. That he could only take things someone else was holding. As the stave came back around, spun and twisted around Wisdom's wrist before it snapped out, Toya lashed out with his katana, focusing to the crack as steel shattered, the blade snapping out and through the metal of the stave, leaving Wisdom open. A shift of his feet, and Toya lunged, sword coming up and around to just kill the fucker. Only for the rasp of metal on metal to meet his ears, the blade slamming to a stop against the man's arm, the cloth of his jacket shredding under the blade to reveal a coil of chain around his arm. What ash? Surprise! The sucker punch was fast. As Toya staggered back, sword dropped, he barely got his bearings before he was getting slammed. The wall to his back, his vision filled with the gleam of golden lenses in the rainy street, and the thud of reinforced gloves as they laid into him. The only reprieve he got was when the two of his crew that hadn't gotten completely knocked out charged the vigilante. With Wisdom turning to fight them off, Toya could stagger along the wall. If he could get away, could get back to overhaul, back to base. The thud of his grunt cracking into the wall in front of him was all the warning he got before he was pinned to the wall with an arm across his throat. So, hi again. Tell me about the girl. The vigilante's voice was nearly cheerful, not even breathing all that heavy despite how winded the blonde Yakuza was. You think this will stop us? That the police will keep us? We're coming for you. The beach belongs to us. She'll come back to us. And next time, we ain't gonna FNG let her escape. And you? You'll die along the way. One more cautionary tale of why you don't F with the shy Hasaikai. Toya tried for the casual defiance he knew was expected of him, staring into the gleam of the vigilante's goggles even as he tried to reach up towards his chin. Then the backhand knocked his mask and hidden knife away. Sorry, was that a threat? 'Cause I wasn't asking about your drama class. Anyway, I really don't care. The Yakuza isn't the worst thing after my head. Blood mixed with the rain, dripping down the blonde Yakuza's chin. When I get out, I'll be the one to cut your FNG throat. A deep sigh, and the arm bar dropped, leaving Toya to slide to the bottom of the wall gasping as he once more got full access to his airway. Then I'll just leave you a parting gift before the cops show up. With that, a boot rose up before stomping down. The snap of a broken knee was only matched by the screams of pain. And then, minutes later, by the sirens of the cops. Momo snorted into her glass, seeing the swaying forms of her friends as they all stood near the exit of the bar. Mina, Uraraka, and Toru were rocking, their bottles of water held high as they sang a drinking song in butchered English, led by the equally drunk pony. Momo glanced at her watch, and winced as it showed it was past midnight, and she could really feel the pulse of alcohol in her veins. You gonna be okay, Jiro? The soft murmur of the purple-haired rocker vibrated against her side, before the words were finally pitched high enough to hear. Just need to call a ride home. Momo sked and shoved the bleary-eyed woman upright, who winced at the headache, before Momo handed her a bottle of water, a flicker of her quirk leaving a pair of painkillers in her hand. Drink up. I'll call you a cab before I head home myself. Really don't need tea-dash. Jiro. Please. Momo knew she could do the so-called puppy eyes, she just didn't use them too often. She used them now. Jiro's face dropped to a petulant scowl, before she snatched up the bottle. Fine. Call me the effing cab. Momo dropped her eyes and gave a blinding smile, before pulling up her phone. From there, the next 15 minutes were a mix of saying goodbye to her friends and paying tabs, with a few moments of comedy. All the heroics girls were more than able to hold their liquor by now, even if some of them felt it more than others. As she waited outside, umbrella over her shoulder and Jiro up against her side, Momo let herself relax. The night had been relaxing, peaceful. Izuku leaned against an AC on the roof a few blocks away from the Yakuza, and glanced at his arm. Where he had caught the sword there was a patterned bruise that stretched from his wrist to elbow. The chain he had used was a last resort weapon, and while it stopped the cutting edge, it didn't disperse the force. As he shifted to sit, he felt at the bones in his arm, before relaxing at the fact they hadn't been broken. But regardless, the bruises were going to be obvious. He would have to wear long-sleeve shirts for the next few days. Across his chest, he poked and prodded his ribs. Early in the fight, when his first stave had vanished to the blonde's quirk, he had taken an enhanced strike to the chest from some sort of impact quirk. Thankfully, his padding had dispersed it, but the slowly building ache and stiffness was an issue. Beyond even his injuries, he was cursing the damage to his equipment. 2 staves, his outer jacket, a flashbang, and the ceramic tiles of his knee pads had all been cracked or broken in that fight. All of it was stuff he could replace, but not easily. And the looming issue of Kai was also on the edge of his thoughts. This wasn't a new gang hunting for territory, no. They wanted a teenage girl and weren't afraid of killing innocents to find her. He marked down the name that he had been given. The Shai Hasaikai, the 8 precepts of death. Finished with his check for injuries, Izuku sighed and headed back home. He would ask Kai about the Yakuza later, when she was more comfortable and he had taught her more than just how to fall. He stretched and poked his quirk, readying it as he considered how to phrase this question. How likely is it that the Yakuza will kill Kai? The ache that accompanies his question nearly knocked him on his butt, and his eyes went wide. 98.1% Kai dies under the Yakuza. Sheet. He closed his eyes and asked a different question. Likelihood Kai being captured affects the grand equation. 99.8%. That settled it. He couldn't let her get captured. Not if he wanted to save the Age of Heroes. Izuku laughed, stretching out his limbs as he watched the local kids across from him jostle and joke. It was the monthly Friday night basketball game. The street was still wet in places, but a fire quirk had cleared the worst of the rain off the basketball court behind the library. The usual teams were present. Izuku stood with Tetsuo, the ant-quirked man stretching his 6 legs and arms, and a lean-figured college student named Zuko, the owner of the previously mentioned fire quirk. The other team, however, was a dozen teenagers and kids from the neighborhood. Pitching his voice higher, Izuku got everyone's attention, the kids getting huddled up against them, while the various adults and parents around the fenced-off basketball court got ready for the game. Happy Friday, guys. The usual rules are in effect. You can use your quirks, but only on yourself or the ball. Don't destroy the ball, we only have like 3 spares. Don't hurt anyone else. No leaving the court or using your quirks outside the fence. First to 50 wins each round. Got that? The low roar of the kids brought a smile to Izuku's face, and he dribbled the ball at his side, as Tetsuo and Zuko formed up. As the kids got ready, forming out on their side of the court, Izuku faced off their chosen leader for the month, a dark-haired Chinese teen with an air quirk named Aang. Bouncing the ball to Aang, Izuku gave the customary check. As it came back with the shout of, "Mate," the game was on. Momo wandered her way through the afternoon sunlight with a slow step, neck wrapped in a loose red scarf, and a long tan jacket concealing a simple black sweater and worn jeans. She had only woken up around noon, the remains of a mild hangover easily fixed with a cup of coffee and one of the bear claws she had picked up from the bakery the day before. That had actually been her reason for getting dressed and going out, in fact. She remembered that Midoriya had mentioned something about a basketball game, and she was curious. As she reached the library, she could hear the game. Shoes on the pavement, the thud of the ball, and the shouts as people reacted drew her towards the fenced area around the back of the plaza. And then she slowed, confused. The game was being played with quirks? Moving closer to get a better look, she tracked the 2 teams, clearly adults versus teenagers, as they darted around. A dark-haired young man leapt with a burst of tightly controlled flames to intercept the ball as a teenager tried to score, throwing it at the fence of the court, where an ant-man caught it, his legs skittering up the fence and around a leaping teen, before he passed it down court. And that's where Midoriya caught it, dribbling it around him with a blur of complicated bounces as he played past 3 teens, twisting around their defense as his teammates rushed up court. Momo almost flinched as a burst of wind from a younger teen rushed at him, but Midoriya was already passing back to the ant-man who shot at the basket, the ball almost missing before with a flash the fire-quirked man caught it and slammed it through. The groans and cheers of the crowds were mixed, but excited, and Midoriya laughed as their teams reset. 10-8. In our favor. The teenagers were clearly determined to make that up, and with a bounce of the ball back and forth, they rushed at the 3 older men. As Momo got closer, she slowed to a stop just outside the crowd, where a cart selling coffee was set up. I wasn't expecting them to use quirks. From her side, behind the cart, An older woman gave her the answer she was looking for. Oh, the court is owned by one of the locals. As long as they don't use the quirk outside of the fence, they're fine 'cause it's private property. Momo gave a nod, but moved closer, curious about the way that they used their quirks. As she reached the fence, she found herself side by side a green-haired girl in a thick jacket and an oversized beret. "Do you mind if I stand here?" Giving a glance up, the girl frowned slightly, before looking back at the game. "Whatever." Looking back, she caught Midoriya dribbling the ball, eyes roving across the teenagers across from him, before his eyes caught hers. He shot a smile her way, before darting into the fray once more. The teens were energetic, frantic with quirk use and rushing to steal the ball by any means necessary. But Midoriya, the mild-mannered baker, was untouchable. The ball bounced and shifted like it was caught in a twister, spinning and bouncing from his touch with every dribble, never landing in the same place twice or at the same speed, perfectly placed around legs and reaching hands, and blasts of quirks as he maneuvered around gusts of wind and blasts of light and sound. Right as it looked like he was being overwhelmed, he passed to the Ant-Man, who had rushed right under the basket. A bounce off a chitinous arm, and the ball was in the air, just in time for a flaming hand to snag it and blast it through the chain net, the black-haired young man following up. As the crowd cheered, Momo couldn't help but cheer along. For 2 hours the game continued. The score bounced back and forth, but always seemed to lean in the older group's favor, though the second game went to the teenagers with a series of comeback victories in a row. Momo spent most of the time watching the game, or slowly walking and talking with the other spectators. All of them lived within only a few miles of the library, or even worked in the shops lining the plaza, and as she introduced herself and chatted, she put names to faces. The gossip helped. Too, soon she knew dozens of little facts that would help her keep an eye out. On the more casual side were the fun facts. Things like how the two coffee shops around the plaza were always in competition, the commercial chain place and the local brewery clashing over any little thing and often scuffling and changing prices to get the better of their rivals. But she also heard about a string of car robberies to the south, where cars kept vanishing overnight. Or the string of obscene graffiti that kept showing up in alleys to the east. Directing questions to the game meant she soon learned that Midoriya's bakery worked with the grocery store and the butcher's shop, as well as a sandwich place a block over. Tetsuo, the Ant-Man, was a local paralegal, and Zuko, their fire quirk teammate, went to a local college as a theater major. But as the game closed up, the teens coerced into helping clean the court and the trash nearby. She caught sight of Midoriya and the green-haired girl she had been near walking back towards the apartment. I guess that was Kai. A short time later, as she headed back home herself, she felt relaxed and far more welcome to the community. The weeks following the first appearance of the Yakuza in Hosu fell into a routine with little effort. Izuku continued to wake early, leaving Kai notes on where he was going and what he was working on, leaving her to sleep in. For the first few nights the teenager slept on the couch in his living room, but soon after she was using a small bed he put in what was once his office of collectibles. Most of those, mint-packaged figurines and merchandise, found themselves sealed up in a series of cases and stashed in a hall closet out of the way. In the morning, leaving Kai to sleep until noon, Izuku worked in the bakery. But when he came back, he devoted his afternoons to helping the teenager, splitting their time between afternoons at the old boxing ring and the bookstore. At the ring, he taught her how to fight, drilling her on punches and kicks, as well as how to take a hit and roll with the motion. But at the bookstore, he walked her through more intellectual pursuits. Math, reading, and history were offered, and the teen consumed them like she was starving for it. In only a few weeks, Kai could do arithmetic up through elementary levels, though with occasional issues with the more complicated divisions or fractions. She could read some basic Romaji, and Izuku had started her on English at the same time, getting her used to the alphabet and a few basic phrases. But the real success with her tutoring was history. Kai couldn't remember dates that well, but the idea of cause and effect shone through. Reasons why things happened stuck in her mind, and she could call them to thought so easily that Izuku was starting to consider whether it might be a quirk interaction. Much like how his quirk led him to numerical theory when he was younger. And the changes to the teen weren't mental or technique-styled only. The girl ate constantly, to the point where Izuku kept stashing snacks in his bag for her at all times. And the new diet showed. She shot up nearly 2 centimeters and filled out more and more each day, the drawn look of near starvation being slowly replaced by healthy muscle and fat, rounding out her features bit by bit. Even while he spent his waking hours training and teaching the teenager under his care, as well as handling the bakery, the nights were different. Wisdom took to the roofs and alleys like always, but this time he was hunting for bird-masked thugs. He adopted a hit-and-run style, picking off single thugs who were creeping through alleys, but never seemed to meet anyone who was of any real import. Though, he did enjoy leaving messages behind for the police and the heroes who picked up his victims. Sadly, he hadn't ran into them since the gang bust, despite quite a few close calls with the hero patrols. The wonders of a hacked communication system was more than enough to let him dance around their paths, leaving unconscious gangsters like ill-thought gifts for them. As nearly a month came to a close, and everything was falling into routine, Izuku couldn't help but be wary. He knew that things were going to escalate. The Yakuza he was taking down were acting more and more desperate. Something was going to break sooner or later. Wisdom would just have to be ready. As he scrubbed his arms, recently returned from yet another pointless expedition, Chisaki Kai was furious. How could it take months for anyone to find a single girl? A girl they knew by sight. A girl with distinctive physical features, no life skills, and who couldn't even read. Each attempt had seen Eri slipping away farther and farther over the years, and he had only tightened his grip on her, limiting her access to anything that could teach her, that could improve her chances. All too often, she had been limited by her inability to read or understand mathematics, unable to figure out currency or gauge distance. And that was before he considered that the 8 precepts and even Chisaki's less potent underlings were trained to lock down and grid search for Eri, and it had been years before she left even the district's borders. And yet, the last sighting they had gotten of Eri's grand escape was her stabbing a member with a knife, stealing his wallet, and sprinting from the edges of the compound before disappearing into the Tokyo metro. And all this was before getting into the issues of the heroes. Despite their strength, the 8 precepts were far from completely anonymous. Years of running what was left of the drag trade in their parts of Japan had left them with more than a mild level of notoriety. Ever since they had first spread out to investigate, they had been harassed and harried across a dozen prefectures, and several had even been injured and detained at one point or another, forcing Chisaki to spend leverage and blackmail to remove them from custody. And in one location, it wasn't even the heroes, it was a twice-med vigilante. Trying to search Hosu was a mess, beyond the higher-than-normal hero presence. Due to Team Idaten's longtime presence as the premier local hero agency, and in particular, the rapid response times they had, he was forced to send in members in plain clothes. Without the leverage of violence, information gathering was slow-going, and when he did send in force when Idaten would otherwise be occupied, he ran head-first into Wisdom. It didn't help that Hosu was one of the few cities where he barely had any leverage among the cops. Commissioner Tsuragami was stationed there, and he was a bloodhound for sniffing out corruption. As it is, he was only able to recover Setsuno when he was being transferred to a long-term holding facility outside of Hosu, and had received the blonde's report with fury and anger. Hands dry and sterile once more, Overhaul stormed through his compound, pacing back and forth through the halls, his eyes roving the medical offices where his underlings performed testing and through to the synthesis labs as they produced various drugs and pharmaceuticals. Even now, without Eri in his grasp, he had enough of her genetic supply, frozen and preserved, to make limited runs of the quirk-dampening bullets, though they were stored and sealed for exceptional needs. The rest of his more illegal facilities were turned towards a much less valuable, but much more stable, commodity. Trigger. The quirk enhancer was unstable, its results inconsistent, and the substance itself was addictive, making the users desperate for another hit, another shot of their disease. Even now, Chisaki couldn't hide the sneer under his mask. So bound by their diseases, addicts one and all to this veneer of power. Finally, he paced past the production area and into the holding cells. Into Eri's cell. The cot was small, clean white sheets and a thin blanket tucked professionally around a foam mat. The floor was sloped to a drain, with a metal toilet bolted to one wall and a sink next to it. There was nothing sharp. There was nothing dangerous, nothing that she could use as a weapon or a tool. She would be locked in here from now on, sealed with his quirk and mimics abilities. No longer would she be allowed any level of freedom. It was perfect, and he would have her back to it soon. One way or another. No. She was Kai now. She had to remember that hit the pad with a smooth roll, coming up facing her attacker. Good. Don't stay on the mat. You're young, you can bounce. Roll with the motion, get back to your feet and keep moving. With a lazy, almost careless wave, the tip of a long staff swung out, and she backstepped away from it. The squeak of her shoes on the dusty mat was distracting, but she made sure to keep her eyes on him. Good. Distance is your friend here. Izuku settled the staff back across his shoulder, holding it in a way that looked almost lazy. Kai knew better. That staff could snap out like a goddamn viper. And stung like one too. Hands, feet, shoulders and knees. The moment she moved out of line, it was there. But only enough to sting. To make her flinch and jump and reset. Next, she called out, bouncing slightly on the ball of her feet, feeling the ache in her calves and shoulders. They had been going for an hour, dives and rolls and recovery. Break. At the word she almost sagged in relief before scrambling to catch the cold, wet towel and bottle of electrolyte punch. The staff swung and launched her way. Wiping the dust and sand from her hands and face was nice. The itch was something she couldn't stand. By the time she was clean and the bottle was drained, Izuku had moved to a different part of the gym, pulling sheets down from around a narrow fenced corridor and revealing chain links and a raised box on the floor filled with packed wood chips. For a long moment, Kai couldn't figure out what it was for, until Izuku stepped in and pulled another sheet off the back wall, revealing a bullseye. You ready, Kai? Izuku called out, making her jump and toss the towel over the bench nearby. Oh yes. What are we learning? Kai had an idea, but, yes, I'm going to teach you to throw things. Sharp things, came the chuckle before with a shift, kind Izuku went away and serious Midoriya stood there. Kind lines faded as he tensed and took a professional, serious look. There are rules to this. Important ones. Both for your safety, the integrity of my tools, and the safety of other people. This isn't one of those things you use everywhere. This is dangerous. Staring up, Kai nodded, arms crossed and serious. Izuku turned and opened a case on the nearby table. It was long and slender, and as he unlatched and opened it, Kai couldn't stop a soft, awesome, slipping from her lips. Knives long, slender and sharp rested in rows, held to the case walls by latches, and with sheaths bundled at the bottom. Izuku pulled one from the case and held it up. Tipped to pommel, it was nearly 30 centimeters, a small disc in the dead center of the knife where the hilt would be. These are my throwing knives. I custom order them. They are very expensive, and they are all, with a twist, he slammed it down on the table, and the blade punched into it like it was paper. Very sharp. Kai nodded, taking him seriously. He had already gone over how to maintain her balisong, but these were an entirely different caliber of knife. This means no spinning, no flipping, no toying around with them. They will cut you. They regularly cut me. He gave a short jerk, and then yanked the blade free of the desk. Now, there are several ways to throw knives, but it boils down to spin and no spin. Wisdom came to a stop to gauge his distance. Each has a benefit or issue of their own. Spin is reliable but only at certain ranges and intervals. For reference, the blade will spin its entire rotation once per length of the blade. Which means, if you can judge the distance, with a smooth motion, he raised and swung his arm forwards, past his head. For a second, the blade spun through the air before, with a thunk of metal into wood, the blade cut into the bullseye. Now, while the distance on that isn't bad, and indeed, you can reliably hit something with the point providing your skills. It's not great. It's a big, flashy motion, and depending on angle and distance, your accuracy takes a dip. Reaching out, Wisdom selected another blade, identical to the first. But now we have the next throw, no spin. Turning, Izuku snapped his arm from his side, up and forwards. With the end of the motion, The blade slipped through his fingers, starting forwards with only the slightest tilt to the blade before it lodged in next to the first, both blades now perfectly mirroring each other's angle. The straight shot means you get a very precise hit, and can throw a good chunk of power behind it with little wind-up, but you lose a lot of distance on the throw. Without the spin to stabilize it, you also lose accuracy at anything more than a few meters. This is good for close range though, especially with smaller blades. Pulling the blades free of the target, he motioned Kai over. Now, everything starts from your stance. You want to square yourself to your target. Half an hour later, after several false starts, one cut finger, and several frustrated words, a blade slammed home on the target. It wasn't a bullseye, not yet, but it was progress. Thank you again for this. Momo smiled at the IT specialist, one Izumi Kushiro, who gave a blush and rubbed his rust-colored hair. It's no issue, Creatimum. I know adjusting to a new system is always a problem. Please, let me know if you require any more assistance. As the tech left her office, Momo gave a short sigh of relief. She hadn't expected to have such a problem connecting to Manual's agency database today, but with it done, she could now focus her efforts on her reports. The last few months had been busy, but in a way that almost felt freeing. Like stretching her legs after a long PRD caged up. A dozen small robberies, 4 car thieves, a small-time smuggling ring, and of course the occasional villain who was using their quirks for mayhem. 3 years in a bullshit contract may have dulled her edge somewhat, but she was feeling back up to her best. Which was great, because tonight she was planning to try her hand at catching a vigilante. Momo opened her file on Wisdom. His known appearances, his latest interactions, especially those with the Yakuza, and his known skills and tools. He had a loose schedule, never appearing more than a night or 2 in a row, but rarely being away for more than a week. He might not be caught in the act of doing something, but he was always spotted. Sometimes by the cops, others by the heroes, or they found one of his captured criminals with those infuriating little post-it notes, words of wisdom, as they were jokingly called. She glanced over the pictures and spreadsheet of the known messages, eyes tracing some of the more interesting ones. Word to the wise, it's not nice to call a girl a prize. Wise guys don't try to wire hot rods. Wisdom says, no more drags, Ned. The format varied, but they all were some form of admonishment. Leaning back in her chair, she sipped her tea, wincing slightly at the chill. Between the IT issues and her ruminations, it had gone cold. Breathing out, she glanced over the appearances one last time. The last sighting of Wisdom was 5 days ago, which meant they were due for another soon, and Momo had gotten word from HeroNet that another intrusion of Yakuza were working near Hosu at the river separating them from Kiyoshi Ward. It was a bit out of his normal route, but she was positive that Wisdom would be drawn into a fight this big. So, as the sky began to darken, she slipped off to the locker room and into her hero costume. The dark red vest was made of a thick, ridged fabric. Bullet and slash resistant, it wrapped her curves with a familiar tight pressure. At her waist, a cross-shaped zipper was present, one on each hip, with a line she could open between them for a larger item. The black shorts she wore, loose around the knee, were of a similar fabric, but with larger reinforced panels over her thighs and around her kneecap. The loose shape meant she could still drop items from her thighs into action. Rounding it out was a sensible pair of ankle-high boots with only a short, wide heel. The one thing she had refused to compromise on with her old costume designers. No ankle-breaking shoes. Ever. Now, with her suit on, she turned towards her arsenal. Back at UA, she learned the importance of being prepared, of gearing up before a fight instead of relying entirely on her quirk to respond in the motion. The result had been the small armory she now had installed here at Manual's agency, but that had been all but gathering dust while she had been under her previous contract. With the social issues surrounding live-round weapons, she had focused instead on acquiring a compressed gas carbine with a charging pump under its barrel. While she did carry 3 10-round magazines of sedative darts, she also had plenty of variants memorized. With the benefit of an open bolt, she could feed anything into the barrel for single use, from flash rounds to explosives, to tracking devices and armor-destructive rounds. Without needing standard powder cartridges, She was limited only by the size and weight of the ammo and the gas pressure of the carbine. She also had long since memorized the design of the gun's magazine for if she ever needed to swap to an entirely specialized type of ammo. Slinging her gun along her back, she pulled out a pair of goggles with night vision filtering capabilities and flash protection, a recent purchase after finding herself blinded, and a pair of tonfa for each hip, each with an inbuilt taser. Satisfied with her weaponry, she turned towards utility. She marked off a grapple gun, a pack of capture ties suited for enhanced strength targets, a backup comms unit, and a set of tracking and audio bugs. Beyond that, with the rifle and her plan to travel at night, a translucent black shawl that hid the gun and muted the red in her silhouette was draped over everything. Satisfied, she connected her phone and usual earpiece to the HeroNet and sat back down on the locker room bench as she ran through the usual check-ins and announced she was starting a patrol. This felt right. This felt good. And with a final check, she rose and headed for the roof exit of the agency, calling out a quick goodbye to one of the secretaries managing the helplines. She had a vigilante to catch. Izuku crouched under a billboard, using the bright digital screen to hide his shape in the shadows beneath it as he fiddled with his gear. Kai is still the Yakuza's target. I've heard rumors of more groups hunting for her, and this is the one closest to Hosu. I need to know who's calling the shots. What are they after? The solo agents who keep slipping into town are getting better at keeping their heads down, and it only takes one or two to slip my network before it's an issue. He ran his hands over the collection of collapsing staves tucked in his belt. The weight of two of his custom Kusari Fundo weighted chains hung from under his jacket sleeves, the coils loose around his wrist and the weights tucked into his gloved palms. Across his back, he felt the weight of his heavier armor, a long, jacket-shaped thing that hung halfway to his knees in front and back, layered with coin-sized ceramic plating tucked in between layers of Kevlar and lined with tight silk. It showed some wear and tear, evidence of the last time he had faced someone with a gun in hand. As he looked down past the glare of the billboard, he saw one of the masked thugs peel off, pacing down the street in a heavy jacket with the nose of a plague mask peeking from under the hood. Taking a slow breath, exhaling mist into the night glow of the sign, he pulled the hood of his armored coat up, hiding pinned-back green hair as its hem magnetically clipped onto the top of his bright yellow goggles. Wisdom exhaled slowly through his face mask, subtle plastic vents releasing his warm breath as mist in the billboard's light, the unseasonable chill of the late night showing itself. For nearly half an hour he paced rooftops and slipped over alleys and side streets, eyes tracing the route of his mark. Wisdom watched as he passed only two other masked men, speaking shortly with each. But finally, he was isolated, tucked into a one-way side street with a turn that hid him from the main streets. He sprinted along the edge of the building, leaping from one roof to the next with a smooth roll, taking only a moment to reaffirm where the plague-masked Yakuza was walking. Nodding, he looked up and down the street. Numbers and formulas filled his mind, vectors and timings and rates of descent and direction. He wanted a relatively smooth path, but one that would preferably end the fight before it began. He glanced over an awning, a street sign that stuck out a bit farther than the rest, and the metal pole of a street lamp. With a grin, he lined himself up, mentally counting down. With a leap, he was in motion. One giant step off the building ledge, a skip to get a bit of extra height off the sign, nearly clearing the street before reaching out and snagging the very edge of an awning, the metal skeleton under the cloth creaking as he swung below it, letting go just before he torqued it free of the mount. For a second he was in free fall before he hooked the pole of the street lamp with one hand and pushed, redirecting his fall. With a crack of bone and a sharp scream, he landed boot first onto the shoulders of the Yakuza, knees bending to lessen the impact only after he felt the shoulders wrench under his feet, dismounting and rolling forwards as the man slammed back first into the ground. With Quantify he could even assess the damage, marking one arm dislocated and the opposite collarbone cracked. Rolling with the motion, Izuku popped up, arms coming up in a silent cheer for a moment of self-satisfaction, before twisting on his heel to look back down at the breathless goon trying to get his breath back. "Hi. I'm looking for info on your boss, his organization, and what you fuckers want." Reaching down, Wisdom gripped the dislocated arm and shoved it back into place to the tune of more screaming. "So please, make this easy on yourself and me. The guard struggled to move, but was pinned by a broken collarbone, something that really isn't conductive to upward motion. For a moment, the side street was filled with wheezed curses and pained gasps. A little pressure got him talking. Overhaul will kill you for this. Deep in his persona, Wisdom gave a casual, almost friendly nod. I'm sure he'll try. Which is why I want answers first. Who is Overhaul, and who are the rest of the precepts? I'm sure you know. You've been trying to sneak into my territory for weeks. I had to go traveling to find you. I won't. The man struggled before some pressure on the shoulder drew more of a scream from him. Then please I give. Overhaul, he's the leader, okay? Of the last true Yakuza. Shai Hasaikai, the 8 precepts of death. The 8, they're Overhaul's guards, his agents. Some of them are FNG terrifying, alright? Wisdom hummed and slowly took more pressure off of the man. And your goals? The man almost sobbed in relief at the lack of pain now. I don't know everything, man. I run drags. I know we do drags, smuggling. I know some of the others sell trigger, some other Quirk specialty stuff. Overhaul's obsessed with the drag stuff. He's a clean freak, white walls, labs, the whole sheet. Izuku gave a hum, moving his knee off the injury to a gasp of relief. And the girl? Why is she important? I don't know. I doubt anyone outside of the inner 8 know what the F is with her. But we know she's valuable. The boss is effing crazy. He's been on us, all of us, for months to find her. I heard she was a project for him, a personal one. Wisdom was about to ask a follow-up, but froze. Something around them had changed. Variables. It wasn't the lack of people. This was an industrial side road heading out of a commercial district at 2 a.m. There shouldn't be anyone around. But his quirk was telling him there were 3 people present. His quirk punched out layers of assessment, measurements that filled his mind with layers upon layers of numeric values, data points on the map. The angle of light bouncing off the walls, off windows, off concrete and asphalt. He measured distances, movement, vibrations. A change. It rippled out, one variable by another flickering as it swerved his way under the pavement. His eyes darted over, hidden by his mask, as he measured space and the angle of the surface, how the light refracted. The specific angles of the floor. Of the street. The concrete shifted. Wisdom was already launching backwards, throwing himself away from the sidewalk and into the asphalt of the road. And the ground under the informant flipped. The 2 paving stones rose up as the gap between them widened, dropping the Yakuza member into the crevice before he could realize what was happening, only for that realization to boil forth in fear. Wait, no, and as the ground opened beneath him, he drew a breath to scream only to be cut off. With a squelch, the blood and paste that used to be his informant splattered up like a geyser from the crack in the pavement. Wisdom slowly rose to his feet. The ground seemed to waver like water, and a small figure rose. It was hunched forwards, a full face mask covering its twitching frame. A puppet or something like it. Small and mobile, half embedded in the concrete sheet. He must have had a check-in he missed. Or he was supposed to run into this one later. Wisdom's quirk was already reading the changes, the path he had taken through the streets nearly as fast as a car. Snitches. Snitches. So many loose lips deserve stitches. As the figure looked towards him, he felt a shiver run up his spine. This wasn't a regular member of a gang. He had felt an echo when he faced the blonde Yakuza weeks ago, but now it was focused. His quirk focused on a special kind of value, something that itched quantify as it read. Lethality. This was a member of the 8 precepts. And he wanted Wisdom dead. Concrete shifted and flipped, sheared rebar bending between panels as they flexed and flipped around towards Wisdom, the vigilante skipping backwards and hooking his hand on a street lamp and twisting up, a thrown concrete square shattering against the metal post even as it wrenched free of the ground. Twisting, Wisdom landed on the bent metal, before leaping to the side, avoiding as another concrete block hurled his direction. The numbers around him were alive. The usual static values of the ground and tension of each surface slowly shifted, signs that the 8 precepts member's quirk was interfacing with the terrain, a shift in potential energy, of stability. A surge in velocity precluded another of the concrete squares being thrown at him, and he rolled back and over the side of a parked K truck, only to duck as the cab was sheared off by another one. A split second gave him a glimpse of the doll-like figure, perched peering out of the brick wall nearby, beaked head twitching back and forth before locking on his direction. Unfamiliar territory, it slowed by learning where everything is and where I am in reference. The brickwork around the figure began to twist, ripping free from the mortar in a wave of cracks. And Wisdom was already sprinting across the street, Quantify spiraling out as trajectories were marked, gleaming lines of danger spinning through the air around him. With a flicker of his wrists, he hooked and ripped the pins from a pair of canisters on his belt, tossing them to the side even as he shook his wrists, his kusari unhooking from where they had been tied around his wrists and slinking from his jacket sleeves. A brick slammed into the pavement, just as Wisdom skipped to the side, dust and shrapnel spraying up as the brick shattered. With a hiss, the canisters began to spray deep gray smoke into the air, even as another line of bricks began to fire his way, Wisdom skipping and twisting back and forth, twisting down to avoid a headshot, a chain whipping up through the still-forming smokescreen and snapping around another as it spun by, the impulse yanking him half a step to the side and out of two more. Another dozen bricks shot through the dust, but the smoke was already rising to shoulder level, and Wisdom sank low, his silhouette vanishing in the billowing smoke. The doll rose out of a wall, before twitching and sliding further up the walls. Looking down over the street from above. Even from above, the smoke was billowing and dense, the dark shapes of cars stood out, roofs still visible above the smoke, street lamps shining down and making the smoke look thicker, light bouncing across the surface irregularly. As the doll hissed to itself, head twitching from side to side, a ripple in the smoke caught its attention. It shot another brick into the smoke, sending it rippling, only for the glint of steel to catch the light as it whipped out of the smoke in another position. The doll jerked to the side, only for a ball bearing to crack off its porcelain mask, cracking the white material. Before bouncing off an awning nearby and into the smoke, just in time a new canister to arc out of the smoke, before it exploded with a deafening flash. As the doll shook and spazzed out, whoever and whatever was using it freaking out from the stimuli. But it was enough distraction for Wisdom. A chain lashed out from the smoke, twisting at the last moment as it made contact with the mask, shattering one of the lenses, only for the entire wall to explode in jagged pieces, bricks and shattered glass dropping across the sidewalk as the doll thrashed and screamed in incoherent fury. From the smoke, another chain lashed out and hooked on a lamp, a fast-moving shadow shooting in an arc from low in the smoke, before swinging up and away, landing on an awning across the street, the chain loosening with a flick of a wrist, before another snapped out for a signboard, the figure climbing higher and higher. A spray of glass shards like a machine gun shattered against the brickwork around Wisdom, the enraged Yakuza throwing the shards like shuriken as it shrieked, street and walls warping as it began to chase him. The neon lights shatter like colorful fireworks and storefronts exploding into rubble as the damaged puppet raced along the street after the vigilante, car alarms and window alarms screaming as stores were savaged by the tide, coils of wires sparking and glass turned to wheels of shrapnel that fired out at the vigilante. Wisdom was keeping off the ground and walls, chains hanging from his wrists tight and tight across his back as he hooked and swung around each corner and from car to car. Occasionally another metal marble would be launched back, each one smacking the doll in the head and ever slowing or infuriating it once more. Hooking a street lamp, Wisdom launched around a street corner and out of sight, the sound of crashing brickwork rippling his way just in time for another canister to skip off the wall in front of the growing mass of monstrous brickwork, the flare of light and sound making the doll thrash, hundreds of pounds of stones and metal and glass simply slumping from its form as a half-dome formed to protect it. By the time it could see and focus, one eye bloodied and red peering from a cracked lens, he saw it. Down the street in a full sprint, arms pumping and body angled low, Wisdom sprinted away, turning down the first of many side streets. And Mimic was not about to let this go. Oh no, this vigilante he was going to shred. With a screech of rage, Mimic took off. Never noticing that the dislodged wire and metal earbud hanging from his shirt and calling the rest of the Yakuza was crushed. hanging free from where that first marble had crushed the receiver. The phone connected to it dangling from his belt was now silent. Creati paused her patrol as her communicator beeped. Creati? Taking a knee behind an air conditioning unit on the rooftop path she was taking, he reached for her earpiece, clicking into the channel. I read you HQ. Major disturbance is being reported. 440 West and along the market streets. We've got half a dozen security alarms from businesses and more every minute. Looks like a villain's rampage, and we Creati, Wisdom has been spotted. He's being pursued by a villain, environmental controller of some variety. Understood, I'll be moving to intercept. Manuel has been alerted as well. The rest of us will be there in 30 minutes. Momo sprinted across the rooftops, grappling gun shooting to take her from place to place, and as she turned around a block of skyscrapers she could see it. Rising dust and smoke from down the street from her, more than half a mile away, and coming her direction. Grinning at the surge of adrenaline that pumped through her, she raced to meet it. A knife spun in young hands, flicking open and closed with each trio of movements: unfold, twist, swing open. Swing closed, twist, fold around the blade. Eri was nervous. Frustrated. She just couldn't make the dumb words work. With a shove, she sent the kid's book slamming across the table, her hand with the knife going back to the pattern. Unfold, twist, close. Swing, twist open. Having trouble, kiddo? The voice made her jolt, the blade nearly falling before she slammed it home into the table without anime. The old lady in charge of the library, Granny Show, pushed the book back towards her. Come now. One full page for me. Eri bit back a groan but eventually gave in. But as she reached for the knife once more, she paused. It didn't want to come out. She twisted her knife, the tip shoved into the wood grain of the table, and refused to come free. That was a bad omen. Eri knew it.